those of you outside to come back in and retake your seats, and if I can invite our speakers for this session to come and join us at the front of the room. So we've got Adrian here already. So if we could have David, Takahiro, Ulrich, and Angela to the front if possible. Thank you. So welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to everyone here in the room, and I hope everyone enjoyed the lunch, which was again very kindly provided for us by our hosts here, Ofcom. So thank you to them, and yeah, I hope everyone who's joining us online has also had the chance to have some lunch, or depending on where you're joining us, maybe it's breakfast or dinner. And it's great to have you all back here now for the first of two sessions we have in this section before we next have a break. Quickly to say to those of you online, once again, thank you very much to anyone who has been putting the questions and comments in the chat. I think it's been quite lively at times on the chat online. So again, any questions that people do have, please do put them into the stage chat on the right-hand side of your screen. And as we did in the last session, we will pass those over to our moderator for this session and the subsequent sessions as well. So having had the session before that was looking at what we're actually trying to achieve in 6G, we're now going to be looking at taking the next steps. So the path from the 6G vision to the actual 6G standards, the global 6G standards. And once again, a fantastic lineup of speakers here with us in the room. And we also have here with us our moderator, Adrian Grace. So Adrian, great to have you here. Looking forward to the session. So I will pass over to you.
Thank you very much, Dan, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As we've already heard today, one of the prerequisites for a successful 6G launch is having a single global unified standard, and many of the speakers this morning have stressed that point. The question remains, though, is that really achievable? And before we get to that point, many people are saying, why on earth are we talking about 6G at all? Isn't it all just a bit premature? Because 5G hasn't exactly been rolled out in any great numbers. We're still in an infancy in terms of 5G deployment. And yet already there's all this talk about 6G. And you see quite a lot of criticism, in fact, from people saying, aren't you getting a little bit ahead of the game here? So just to remind you where we are, and it's repeating a little bit what we heard this morning. But the big vision for 6G has been set by the ITU. That was published last October. You can go to the ITU website, you can download it for free and read it at your leisure. But importantly, within that vision document is a timeline. And the timeline really quite clearly says that by the end of this decade, so by the end of 2029, we will have the first submission of standards that will define the next generation 6G. Well, that's only 5.5 years, and any of you who've been involved in writing standards will know that 5.5 years is not actually a long time in standards terms, because in writing standards, we first have to have good research results. We need to look at those research results and understand them. We then need to capture the use cases. What actually is it we're trying to achieve? What are we trying to deliver with this generation? We then have to look at technologies that will address those problems and try and solve them. We have to write standards. We have to validate those standards. So 5.5 years actually is not a long time. And if history repeats itself, it will be a bit of a scramble to actually get through to the finish line in an orderly way in time. So that's why there is so much talk at the moment about 6G. And we can argue whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. The IT vision is out there. It's been agreed by governments that actually approve that document. So governments have bought into this big vision. So I'm delighted to have this panel with me today who are going to help us to understand what does that mean from a standards point of view? What are we trying to encapsulate within the standards that we write? Is it achievable to have a single global unified standards with all the geopolitical tensions we have? What can we learn from the move from 4G to 5G? Perhaps we oversold that a bit. Should we be learning from that? And then finally, just to understand what are we likely to have on day one when we publish 6G standards at the end of 2029. So the panelists on the stage here are not placed in any random order. There is a logic here because in a technology innovation life cycle, you always start with research. And Angeliki Alexiou from the University of Paris here on my left represents this research activity, which is always a precursor to good standards. David Bosworthick, who is Director of New Technologies at ETSI, represents the standards sector, which is where hopefully those research results will end up. We then expect that there will be a number of suppliers who will take those standards and build products. So we're delighted to have Dr. Ulrich Drottmann from the Global Mobile Suppliers Association, who represents that club of top-tier vendors who will take those standards and produce products for the market. And last but not least, we will deploy those standards. So we're delighted to have Takahiro-san from NTT Docomo, flown in from Japan. He's been around an awful long time, almost as long as I have, I think. So if you want to have a very knowledgeable operator voice, then what better than having Takahiro, not just an operator voice, but actually a voice from Japan, because Takahiro will be representing and trying to present to us the views of not just his company, but those of his Japanese colleagues. So to kick things off, each panelist has a maximum of 5 minutes to give their pitch. They're going to hopefully keep us awake after lunch. We have one very short presentation from Alexiou, and then we will have 3 verbal interventions from the other panelists. So without further ado, Alexiou, please, sorry, Angeliki. I'm sorry, Angeliki, please take the floor.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you for the introduction. So I think we do start from research indeed, and I hope it is not only research that takes the blame. So what I'm going to do in the next 5 minutes is just to give you a very brief overview of the latest developments in terms of trends, in terms of directions that we see research going. And the good thing is that most of it has been covered already in the previous sessions. So it's going to be easy, I think. Let's try to start from now, where we are now. Just a couple of observations. We've heard a lot about the IDU's timeline and about 3GPP kicking off the official 6G, let's say, era, with the workshop a few days ago on the use cases. In this environment, let's try to see a delta. What is different today from what it was years ago when we were starting 5G? And I could easily point out 3 main topics that seem to be very central in this, in the lines of thought. First of all, let's admit it that societies and the economy are now really dependent on mobile communications. You can take any application or any sector you like, and you will see that all the services and operations are based on the fact that people are connected through their mobile phones. Second thing is that there's a lot about AI. There's a lot about AI transforming our lives and transforming networks, etc. So there is a very clear emphasis on making everything intelligent, also with a new word, intelligentization, being used recently. And the third point is that, of course, sustainability is now more than ever, and for the first time, actually, part of the requirements. So sustainability goals are part of the design requirements, and the fact that there is no planet B is now being taken, I think, seriously into account. Having said that, and looking at the usage scenarios that, for example, have been agreed on in IDU and in other fora, one can identify 4 main directions of what is expected from 6G. So these directions, first and foremost, is sustainability and inclusion. The second one is about immersiveness in connectivity. So we want connectivity to be everywhere, to be available in a transparent fashion, and to be able to overcome obstacles, to function in all kinds of environment, and in a way that it is ambient, let's say, in all the environments that we live and work. Third direction is intelligence, artificial intelligence. And fourth is about sensing. It's about, it was discussed in the morning about this cyber-physical interaction, this new reality, let's say, that integrates the cyber reality and the physical world. So these 4, the next one is not really working. These 4 directions, I think, introduce a great challenge for 6G. And I believe if I am to name just one difference, I would name this difference. So this delta is about going beyond communication. So networks are not about transferring information from A to B. They are now expected to do several things, including sensing the environment, monitoring, shape identification, understanding the semantics, you name it. I think this new challenge is, this beyond communication challenge creates the need to introduce new KPIs and creates the need that was mentioned in the previous session to move not from performance to values. So these new KPIs are now becoming KVIs. You need, for example, resilience and sustainability to be delivered and measured, not just capacity and reliability. Having said that, I think we can safely now name networks perceptive. Perception is about understanding, is about shaping the environment, is about being able to monitor, make intelligent decisions, and provide services that are going beyond communication. And these perceptive networks, if you can do next slide. These perceptive networks would need this type of capability identification that we see here. What it means to understand communication capabilities, their evolution towards 6G, but also to understand the new capabilities that the network need to respond to. And this is the well-known schematic of IDU, and this is the way that most of research is thinking about it today. So if you can do the next. So what is the difference in these beyond communication networks? What is really that we need to deliver? What is research, supposed to be doing? It's about defining new functionalities that would go beyond communication, that would have to do with sensing, tuning, understanding the semantics of the environment, and being able to, in a programmable fashion, to change it in an optimal way. So when you took, if you can do next slide, and I'm almost done. So let me just jump to the conclusions. So I will, use an example from the past. Is a very old reference. It's like a 60-year-old reference from Shannon and Weaver. In their mathematical theory of communication, they talked about these 3 levels. The first one is the technical level, when you transmit information from A to B. The second one is to understand the semantics, to understand the context of the information. And the third level is about doing that efficiently, in today's terms, in a sustainable fashion. I think what we've done so far, maybe until 5G, is to do part of level A, to be honest. So I think there is a lot to be done to address levels B and C. And I think we started by very nicely structuring the requirements and the trends and the direction to do so. So with that, I will just use one more remark. If I can do next slide, please. Which is the following, that what is the recipe? Is there a recipe for standardization success? Well, probably not. But there are some ways to think about it. So think about research, for example. Research innovation is supposed to produce new ways of delivering the right requirements. And the line is that the research output is feeding the new enablers design and the new system architecture, which is going to be standardized. But this chain needs to be nicely complemented by the top-down chain, which is about translating vision into usage scenarios and then translating usage scenarios to requirements, KPIs, target KPIs and target KVIs. So I think, I'm not sure if this is the recipe, but I know this is definitely something to very carefully work on, is to make these 2 lines coordinated, make sense to each other and of each other, and also coordinate how these 2 lines interact with the ecosystem. What are the priorities of the ecosystem? This might be sustainability, tunability, situational awareness, intelligentization. So I think this is our exercise, and hopefully research can help. Thank you.
Thank you, Angeliki. Yes, indeed, a round of applause. I'm going to quiz Angeliki later when we get on to the panel session. But for the next speaker, David Boswell, I think from ETSI, Director of New Technologies, I believe.
Thank you, Adrian. Good afternoon, everybody. I have the pleasure of taking the next step. So once we've looked at vision, global vision for 6G, what does it need to be? What does it need to deliver? When will it be provided? We need to look at what standardization will be required. So I do like this logic of research, pre-standards, standards, building the solution and then rolling out the solution. Just noting that all of the people on this stage are involved in all of the stages. So you will have companies from the vendor community, the operator community, inside the research community driving projects such as HexaX or other projects. So it's a related flow, but everybody's involved at every stage, which is good for the overall coordination and collaboration, and also the socializing between people as well. So just a brief word about ETSI. First of all, thanks to the organizers for inviting us to partner up on this event. It's a very useful event. ETSI is a European standards organization. We provide ICT-oriented standards for Europe. We're very much focused on research and innovation. If you look at our members, we have about 920 members from operator, vendor, system integrator, governments, national standards bodies, and researchers. This is the important thing. If you take our 920 members, there are about 15% who are public research, private research, academia, so the universities doing research. So 50% of who we are is absolutely oriented towards research and innovation. For the past 3 or 4 years, I've had the privilege of having this job of Director of New Technologies, which basically means look at new tech, look at research, basically. To that end, we've been working extensively with the European Commission on SNSJU projects, so phase 1, phase 2, and soon to come up phase 3. We've been working with DCIT and FONRC funded projects in the UK. Obviously, I'm from the UK, so that has been an easy one for me to get involved in. And our involvement really is to enable those research projects to think about standardization earlier on. If you go back to the the research stages of 4G and 5G, standardization from a research perspective was really not considered during the project. This has evolved through Horizon 2020 and now in Horizon Europe. We see that the research projects do have a work package usually inside saying outreach, standardization. So this is a good evolution between the 4G, 5G, and now onto 6G. When we work with these projects, we provide them with standardization advice. So they don't always need it, because if you look inside the projects, you have a lot of people who will be involved in 3GPP, who will already be involved in ETSI. But sometimes these projects need to know how to get involved, where to get involved, who to contact, how to do standards, where and when. So we're there to advise on that. We're often on advisory committees. So I know we're on the Reason Advisory Committee. We're on several 6G projects in the European Commission. We advise them from the inside. In any case, we're there to, our simple raison d'etre, to use a bit of French, is to ensure the maximum percentage of research and innovation makes it into standards and then into products and market. That's it, very simple. And we'll put in place any tools, enablers to make that happen. So in ETSI, we have education about standardization to inform the communities, often in the universities. Why on earth would standardization be interesting? Again, there's this concern that there's not that many standardization specialists around anymore. We're getting gray-haired and some of us are retiring. So we need to educate the next generation of technology specialists to understand the importance of standardization, the value of standardization. So when our members in these various projects, so if you look at some of the earlier ones, some of our success stories from the recent past, NFV, Edge, MEC, ENI, ZSM, self-sustaining networks. This is when members, so again, ETSI is here to serve our 920 members. When they think the research is mature, the market is ready, and the time is right, they will come to us and say, we'd like to set up a pre-standardization activity. So back 12 years ago, this was a group of operators coming to us and saying we need to look at network virtualization. Recently on beyond 5G, 6G building blocks, we've seen ISGs, industry specification groups, being built in ETSI by our members on the topics of reconfigurable intelligent surfaces, RIS, to extend coverage and to increase energy efficiency as well, network efficiency. We've seen early groups set up in 2022 on sub-terahertz channel modeling. So although I think moving forward, we've seen that terahertz is possibly way out there on the 6G timescale. It won't be the thing that is seen on day one, but it doesn't stop the fact that universities and researchers are working on that. They're researching on that topic. So we've given them a place where they can bring their early research ideas, develop them with industry. So you'll have operators, vendors, and testing houses in there working alongside the researchers to grow the concept in the community. So it really is about linking together research, pre-standards and full standards. What we do ensure is that all of the work done in the ETSI ISGs are available to all. So you don't have to be an ETSI member to be inside. You can join as a participant. All of the results are open. And we have active liaisons towards 3GPP, because when we talk 5G and 6G, our standardization body of choice or our partnership project of choice would be 3GPP. So all of the output from, let's say, reconfigurable intelligent services, sub-terahertz, integrated sensing and communication, which was the most recent ISG, we make that available to 3GPP so they can consider reusing it, referring to it, or throwing it away. It's just, again, we try to accelerate the European position on research into 6G. So these sort of ISGs can be seen as an accelerator, an incubator to research to get onto standardization. In addition, we've been mapping, so this to the people working on research projects, we've been mapping SNSJU phase 1 projects, SNSJU phase 2 projects to ETSI working groups, to 3GPP working groups. So if somebody wants to know, I'm working on reconfigurable intelligent surfaces in this project, which group should I be talking to in ETSI? Which group should I be talking to in 3GPP? We have this wonderful table. It's wonderful because I made it, which will say, okay, this standards group could talk to these research projects, and these research projects can think about going to ISG RIS, SA1, SA2, SA5, RAN 4, something like that. So it really is designed to hitch the wagons together between research and standardization. This was taken up recently. So ETSI began the initiative, the SNSJU office, so the people supporting the SNSJU have taken this from ETSI, and they're going to build this for SNS phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and beyond only ETSI and 3GPP standardization group. So that's a big success. And then finally, when we're talking about research and innovation in ETSI, we've made, about 3 years ago, a technology radar. And it sounds very simple, but basically you can't standardize what you don't know which is going to happen. So if we'd known that AI was going to be important 7 years ago, we may have preempted something by doing some pre-standards. If we knew that blockchain was going to be so important 5 years ago, we may have set up ISG-PDL earlier. So it's having this sort of foresight about where the market's going. To that end, we look at research agendas, we look at policy direction. So when the Commission says we need the community to work on that area, we'll add that into our radar. And we look at business opportunities as well. So which companies are going into which areas, which markets are going to which are developing as potential 5G, 6G solutions. And then we'll add that to the radar and then analyze what could the standards requirement be, and is there work in ETSI or 3GPP that needs to be done. So all in all, our function in ETSI, or my function in ETSI, is linking research, innovation and standardization, and ensuring the maximum percentage of research makes it into standardization and then onto products and onto market, which links nicely into our next speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Next to speak is Ulrich Droppmann, Vice President with the Global Mobile Suppliers Association. Ulrich.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. You saw me this morning on the video. I saw myself as well. That was good news. First, I was happy that I wasn't embarrassed what I was saying a year ago. And then I also noticed that we made progress since. So we moved from Bahrain now to here. And we got a logo. We got a 6G logo. This is excellent. So we have now a dedication of 3GPP to start work on 6G. And I also moved. I'm still working with Nokia, but I was presenting on behalf of Nokia last time, and now I'm here standing as Vice President and Executive Committee member of the GSA. So what is the GSA? First, the GSA is not the GSMA. Sometimes we get confused. There's also another organization with three similar letters, the GSOA, but with all due respect to Peng, I guess nobody will ever confuse our two organizations. So this is an organization of the global mobile supplier. It's only a small amount of members: Apple, Ericsson, Huawei, MediaTek, Nokia, Intel, Qualcomm, Samsung, and ZTE. So relatively small amount of executive member, but we represent those who drive the technologies. And of course, with all due respect to the standardization organization who administer the work, it is our members who actually not only do the product, but also who drive the standardization work. And the role of the GSA is to promote the 3GPP technology, family of technologies. And we've done this from 2G onward. You will probably also know very well the data we provide on market take-up, different technologies. And since 2015, we are very active also in the spectrum activities, and many of you know that. They are quite often with a joint position and aligned position with the GSMA. But we started maybe 5 years ago also to say, yes, we are fierce competitors in standardization, but we have a common interest. All of these companies, more than the many other hundred of companies who participate in standardization in 3GPP, have such a strong strategy of their business success in that body. So we are very much interested in a couple of things: in global standard, and to make this a successful technology. So we have been setting up some exchanges of views to ensure that, to help maybe behind the scene facilitate discussion. What is important? I think there is sort of on the operational side, it's of course important when we want to have a global standard in 3GPP that we get our house in order. And sometimes ETSI needs a little bit of push and the MCC. So we have been trying to make sure that we modernize the way of working and similar things. Also, geopolitics. Of course, we have very opposed views on the geopolitical context, but there is an interest that we don't get a too strong domination from one side, and making sure that the rules, the way that 3GPP operates, is also fit to this more difficult environment we are in. And that is, despite all the difference in view, something which unites us. And when it comes to standardization right now, 3GPP has declared that there is an interest to work together, and then we had a workshop then just last week on the requirement side, and this work will then start with a big, more technical workshop next year. And I think what is important to converge to very on an early phase is how you build the house. So if this is how you need to have the terrain, and you will not be able to fulfill the whole vision. So there is a difference between the vision. We saw this ITU vision just before, but also what do we want to have achieved on the day one? And I think there is quite a lot of discussion which we took on what should that be. And of course, maybe not everything which is vertical terahertz will be relevant for commercial deployment on the day one. And the timeline, even though we have been a bit different view on the timeline, in order to start, it's important that you know what is the endpoint. And the endpoint is certainly those when the market starts. It's not when each and every operator in Europe sees the market relevance on 6G starting for them, but when the market starts. And we hear 27, 28 from some markets in Asia, which might be a bit early, but that we have a timeline which doesn't leave it too wide of a gap so that we don't get into fragmentation. And the last point, my colleague Matthew mentioned that also, before we start, also you need to look a little bit how we build it. And so the architecture is very essential in the way that we build it. So that we only have a 6G architecture that connects to the 6G core, or do we something more complex? I guess the rest with the requirements we have seen the number of time are quite converging in the industry. So we look very much forward now to get our hands really dirty to do the standardization work for market readiness by 2029. We believe we are very confident that we convince the market of the value of the technology in a cost-effective and sustainable way. And I'm looking forward to discuss a little bit some of the details of standardization in the upcoming half an hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ulrich. And last but not least, Takahiro Nakamura, CSO with NTT DOCOMO.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me this great event. From my side, I'd like to point out 4 topics on the standardization for the 6G as one of the operator point of view and one of the delegate representative from Japan. And the first one is a priority of the use case and the technologies. Yeah, so far, there's so many use cases and the technologies are proposed in all of the 6G organizations in the world and the 3GPP and the ITU. It is clear that we cannot treat everything once. And so it is important to have a common understanding, common views, what kind of the use cases should be supported and what kind of technology should be supported at day one of the 6G. So I think it is better to have such kind of the discussion and the common understanding on the priority. Especially, yes, everybody say that the sustainability, everybody say that the AI. But actually, they are conflicting in some sense. The AI consumes a huge electric power, so that is not so sustainable. So how to make a balance between those kind of the topics? That is one of the topics need to be discussed. And also a regional requirement and the country by country different views, and maybe we have. So especially in Japan, the network resiliency is very important. Mobile communication network is now lifeline. And yes, as you know, Japan has a many variety of the disasters, including the earthquake, typhoon, or blah, 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 blah. So resiliency of the network is very, very important, not only for the disaster case, but also the system failure due to the human error, human operation error, and also out of the service, out of order of the equipment. That is one, we need to cope with such kind of things. So yes, anyway, priority need to be considered. Second one is backward compatibility issues. Yeah, I mean that the evolutionary approach or revolutionary approach. In other words, we can accept the non-backward compatible manner for the 6C. In principle, for the new generation system, we accepted the non-backward compatible technologies, assuming that the big gain is that those kinds of technologies. But from operator point of view, we don't want to pay much money to introduce the new generation system. So many of the operators think that maybe the evolutionary approach is preferable to introduce the 6C. And also, I noted that even for the vertical industry people, they had a different life cycle of the system, longer life cycle in the factory or automotive industry. If so, they also like to have a evolutionary approach, not a revolutionary approach. Yes. So maybe we need to consider common views on the evolutionary approach or revolutionary approach, and we should accept the non-backward compatible manner or something. Yes, but my point of view, we should accept the non-backward compatible manner, revolutionary approach, if those kind of technology has a very, very big gain. Yes. So let's see that what kind of technology will come. And the third one is, pre-standard activities. And so far, the 6C was studied so much in each country, each regions. Yes, even in Japan, we studied the 6C in the so-called Beyond 5G Promotion Consortium. And before starting the real actual standardization discussion in the 3GPP or ITOR, maybe the global 6C organizations can do something to have a common views so that we can take a smooth standardization activities in the 3GPP or ITOR, I think. But I have no clear idea what we can do, what we should do. But maybe we should better to discuss among the 6C organizations in the world as for the pre-standardization. And the last, I'd like to talk about the millimeter wave. I'm a fan of millimeter wave, and I'm supporting, actually I'm one of the leaders of the millimeter wave promotion in the Japanese 5G promotion organizations. I'm shouting millimeter wave all over the world, actually. And but millimeter wave is not the standardization topic anymore. We are ready to deploy the millimeter wave. But the further improvement to improve the millimeter wave coverage, such kind of solutions to be treated in the 3GPP so that those kind of technologies can be used for the FR3, 7 to 15 or 7 to 24 gigahertz also, and also sub-terahertz, I believe. So millimeter wave should be deployed more, and we should be more active to deploy the millimeter wave so that we can have a good knowledge and the skills to deploy the FR3 or sub-terahertz in the future in 6C era. Okay, that's my talk. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Takahiro-san. Let me just pick up on a couple of points that you panelists have made, starting first with Angeliki, because I'm still struggling to understand how you decide what it is you're going to research. And if we look at all of the research activities globally, there's an enormous amount of research activity. So how do you decide what it is you're going to research, and how can you be sure that that will result in something that will be implementable and be useful to society?
So,
Just
okay. So, well, that's a $1 million question, of course. But apart from that, I think usually the motivation is a certain feature that you would like to achieve that is not there before. So you identify this capability. Take, for example, the sub-terahertz regime, just to give an example that is very close to my heart as well. So the idea is to be able to deliver, for example, massive MIMO systems to achieve coverage along with very high capacity. And the only way to do that is to go to higher frequencies, higher bandwidths, but to be able to also to account for the propagation characteristics. So in order to do that, you want to do, for example, pencil beamforming to achieve very important coverage and capacity at the same time. So the way that research functions is that there are goals that go beyond what we know as 5G, let's say, that you want to achieve, and then you search for technologies that could potentially, at least fundamentally, achieve those goals. So another example is reconfigurability and tunability that is possible to happen with reconfigurable intelligent surfaces. So it is very often that you look outside of the box in other disciplines, like materials, for example, for solutions to this type of research problems. So it is not always an extrapolation on known technologies. Actually, this is not enough. It has to be cross-fertilized with other disciplines as well.
Okay, then a similar question for you, David, because I got the impression, you'd like to standardize everything that comes out of research. So how do you pick the winners? How do you take Angeliki's results and decide which of those are right to be pre-standardization activities and eventually be destined for 3GPP? Because that's got to be a tough task.
I mean, if you look at it, I always look at it as a funnel. At the top, you have a lot of great innovative research ideas. Many people working on, corporations are working on their research. So Nokia, Samsung, Orange, and all these people, they have their own research visions. Then you have European funded projects going in certain directions. They follow strategic research and innovation agendas as defined by Network Europe, which is sort of pre-agreed on directions that research needs to go. But I think Angeliki said it very well. It's research is about solving problems. So if there's a problem or an optimization that needs to be found, researchers will dig deep and they'll go away and they'll research and come up with a solution. What we've seen is not all research on TRL level 3 through to 7 is mature enough for standardization. So if you have 100 research projects, you may have 60 make it to pre-standards, you may have 40 make it to standards, you have 2 that make it to market. So I always see it as this sort of wide funnel. What we're trying to do in ETSI is make the funnel thinner, so a large amount of research makes it into pre-standards, into standards.
But how do you do that?
We follow our members. As Ulrich absolutely stated, ETSI is there to serve our members. So when our members say, so our member organizations say that it is the time we want to do this, they'll use the tools provided by ETSI to do what they want to do. So if we create a new standardization activity in ETSI, it's because 10, 20 members have said, now is the right time, ETSI is the right place. So we listen to our members to make sure.
So there is some sort of entry bar that you have to exceed the bar before.
Yeah, for an ISG, it's typically 4 ETSI members, but that's nothing out of 920. Recent ISGs, they had over 20, 22 founding members. That quickly ramps up to about 40 active members. So yeah, that's the sanity bar. But in standardization, it regulates itself. Standardization, especially in 3GPP, is everybody knows everybody, everybody respects everybody, competition and cooperation. So the whole show actually auto-regulates in a nice, elegant manner. So again, we always go to our members and say, is this the right technology to standardize now?
Okay, let's move on swiftly then to both Uli and Takahiro-san, because You've both sort of touched on this rather thorny question about whether 6G should necessitate hardware replacements or not. And from the operator side, and we've heard it already this morning, there's not an appetite to go and spend a lot of money unless there is a compelling expected revenue stream that's going to compensate from that. And you, Uli, I mean, you listed the vendors who are members of GSA, but I mean, to be honest, if we add those up, that's by far the lion's share of the vendor community. It's all of the big players are there. So whatever you can decide as a club will have a huge impact. The question, though, is that if we're going to have this approach about hardware or non-hardware replacement, that will materially affect the content of standards. So to some extent, that has to be tackled before we start to write standards. Else it'll be too late because the standards will necessitate one route or the other. So how do we solve this? Where do we debate it, and where do we draw meaningful conclusions? Starting with you, Willie.
Yeah. First, the GSA is not a club that decides, because then this we all do in the open in the open standardization. Yeah, of course, I've heard the statement about the hardware update, and that many times, and I think what is not meant is that all the hardware that is out in 2024 is able to support that load. It would be like I have an Android phone which is relatively new, that I expect that this Android phone will be able to support the Android version in 20 years. It will, of course, support the next and the 2 and the 3 years of Android, and the suppliers all got better. Here, I think it is similar. So we, as our company from Nokia, and I would assume others are similar, work on the situation that the hardware that we are delivering around 27, 28, I said this is a systematic roadmap, not a Nokia statement, that the hardware that we are delivering in 2 years or so, that hardware will be able to have the software load. But in order to do this non-costly update, of course, there are the other factors. The other factors is the hardware is deployed at the base station site, and this base station site provide the coverage. So in order to have a new service, we need to be able to cover urban areas, so to speak. You cannot only introduce 6G when you cover whole of London, for example. So of course, that's why it is so key that we have frequencies not only in the rate, but also in the condition. We come on the 6 gigahertz power sharing that allows that this operates then on this existing site. Then we have our existing base band, and we can use the existing site, and that is cost effective. If we have to go to millimeter wave, if it is not yet deployed, then we can do as much as we want on having the same hardware. We need to install plenty stuff to be able to have the coverage, right? I guess what is still would be needed, what also Matthew mentioned earlier, is if the antenna is of higher order, then we would need to have a RF end. But we have the same site, we have the same baseband, and that will be able to run the software load. And having read all the documents from NGMN and others, this is how we understand that requirement, and that requirement makes a lot of sense, right? And for that, indeed, we need to design 6G accordingly, and we need 6 gigahertz, and we need 7 to 8.4 gigahertz without the spectrum sharing that was mentioned earlier by NTIA, because that will also typically reduce the power. But there's no free lunch. It is about like what Takehiro Nakamura said about sustainability and artificial intelligence. I think it is also here that the exclusive frequencies and those bands and the cost effectiveness of the deployment goes hand in hand. Thanks.
So are you satisfied with that, Takehiro-san, or is that not going far enough?
Not so much. No. Yeah.
I love a bit of contention on that.
Yeah, but actually, the network softwareization is one of the trend, And even for now, many of the functionalities can be updated by the software. So, and also not only the core network, even for the RAN, virtual RAN will be deployed more and more in the future. So most of the feature can be realized, deployed by the software upgrade. And but on the other hand, the historically, so far we also update our systems by the software in principle, even for now. But some cases, due to the limitation of the hardware performance, we need to change the hardware. Maybe even in the future, we will face such kind of things. But we can use the general hardware thanks to the virtualization technologies of the core network and even for RAN. So let's see what happens for the hardware requirement, hardware limitations. Hopefully, of course, we should avoid the hardware update, frequent hardware update, but the software. But also, we hope that the software update is also cheap. Yeah. Yeah. So that's an issue.
I think affordable is probably a better word than cheap. But,
cheaper.
Cheaper.
Cheaper. Yeah. Cheaper, better. Yes.
cheaper. Okay, that's. I mean, I don't think we're going to. This whole subject could be a subject for a conference in its own right. But let's keep on the contentious subjects and look at lessons we could learn from moving from 4G to 5G, and in particular, this whole thing about giving an expectation to the outside world, which isn't exactly what happened on day one. And I think, as a standardization community, I think we need to take some of the blame there in having expressed to the outside world this fantastic vision. And it starts with the research slides where you see these tremendous use cases you're working on. And when push comes to shove and 5G gets deployed, actually that's not what you see on day one. So what should we learn from that? How should we explain to the outside world what it is they're actually going to get on day one for 6G? Should we be much more circumspect in how we present this to the outside world? How should we encapsulate that? Maybe we should start with you, Angeliki, because your slides are quite sort of evocative in some way. They create this grand picture of 6G, but is that actually what's going to happen in real life?
Indeed. So I think one important element that has been always there, and we always understood its value, but it is now more than ever, that we needed is validation of research ideas, of research trends, and of certain solutions that research is proposing to do. So what has been really a major part of our recent research is experimentation and validation with software simulation platforms and with hardware testbeds. That has played a major role in 5G already, but I think it will be only in 6G that we will really understand the value of that. So it may well be that, I know, these usage scenarios and use cases and technologies are quite grand and, very often very difficult to achieve in the day one version of it, all these benefits. But I'm sure there is a roadmap towards there, and this day one is about achieving the basic features, about delivering proof of concept testbeds that would prove that this is possible, and that would prove that this is feasible and efficient, because this is what it is about.
And they need to be revenue generating, because otherwise
Absolutely.
they're great solutions which no one is prepared to pay for.
So complexity and cost and impairments are really, we need to account for them from day one.
Okay, is this something GSA can help with, Uli? The communication side, are engineers the best people to do communications work?
Yeah, I think first, Adrian, I think you emphasized an extremely important point, and of course, in research we have to articulate the vision, and I guess we cannot kind of make the research community accountable for the fact that we have a motivating vision that we did for IMT 2020 and IMT 2030 or 6G now. I think it is the community on the standardization. I think was good. Both Takahiro and myself, we use the term day one of the standard. So we prepare now. That's why this pre-standardization phase is happening. We prepare now before there's a big chunk of construction ongoing in 3GPP to have an idea what is the first version of the standard. And, we had in IMT 2020, and I saw this now for IMT 2030, we had this fantastic triangle with the vision, but we never articulated that what you got from 3GPP release 15 non-standalone is not that. We too understood this and others, but we never educated that, and that gap will become bigger because now we not only have this super triangle, but we have a circle, and we go from 1 millisecond to 0.1 millisecond. And I can tell you here openly, this is not going to happen in 2030 that you make your 6G device and you get anything of that. So I guess indeed we should be clearly and maybe as an industry more consolidated. Maybe the GSA and also operators community like the NGMN and the GSMA should take a role in communicating a little bit earlier before the start of 6G, what really is the capability that comes out of the first release of the standard, and get away from what is in the knowledge of the general public, which was the 6G vision. And I certainly, this is something we need to think about in 3GPP as a GSA and other association to make that a better job. But we created that gap in the general public, and that was certainly not good. 5G is a really good technology, and a bit of the blame is because we never managed this perception gap.
But let's be clear. I mean, historically, we can talk about not wishing to overhype, but we shouldn't underhype either, because there is good hype. Hype is actually quite useful. Look at the amount of funding we've seen for research projects, and governments get very excited when we explain to them the potential of the next standard. So I think whilst we don't want to overhype, we don't want to underhype anyway. Did you want to add something, Takahiro, on this point?
Yeah, we learned a lot on the hype for the 5G. I mean, we promoted 5G too much, and still the vertical industry people misunderstand that the 5G is a dream system. Yes, anywhere, anytime, the more than 10 gigabps achieved and less than 1 millisecond latency achieved. So maybe we should explain the real of the 6G before deploying the 6G to the other industry people. Yes, and especially beginning of the new generation system, of course, we cannot achieve the requirements to be set in the standardization fora. Yes, maybe. So that kind of things, reality, need to be explained to the other industry people. And also, day one, what kind of the technologies, use cases should be supported. Yeah, as I mentioned, it's a free important discussion on the priority topics. And maybe most of the operators say similar things, I think, but maybe operator by operator, region by region, country by country, maybe different flavor of the preference. So yeah, actually, even in the 5G case, we had some fight with the European operators. The European operators prefer the IoT, yes. But we prefer the massive EMBB. Yeah, finally, EMBB, successful, okay? Yeah, but I really want to avoid such kind of the meaningless fight among the operators before starting the 6G standardization. Yeah.
Okay, let's just see if there are any questions from the floor. Yes, there are quite a few hands, not unsurprisingly. William, if you can keep the questions short, we'll try and get as many in as we can.
Thank you, William Webb, independent consultant. We heard this morning that one of the key objectives for 6G is the HETNet, the idea of combining fixed Wi-Fi, cellular, HAPS, device to device, or direct to device. Of course, we've heard this before. 3G was UMTS, Universal Mobile Telecommunications System. It was meant to be a HETnet. 5G was very much meant to be a HETnet, and it's not happened at all. And primarily that's because 3GPP is a cellular standards body that leads the way and doesn't include other technologies. So is it time for a standards body that sits above 3GPP and the IEEE in order to bring them both together and form some kind of overarching standard that really can achieve HETnets this time round?
Be careful what you wish for. Takahiro, did you want to let's see, take Takahiro first and then Uli.
Yeah, we need to consider the complexity of the system and the complexity of the operation of the system to deploy the HETnet systems, and also revenue. Yeah. So far, yes, actually, from the many years ago, we are deploying the Wi-Fi system and the cellular system both. And yeah, some kind of the HETnet-like technologies, functionalities are already deployed, but in the end, that's not so important and that big demand from the market. That's my understanding. Actually, for the users, it is good to use the devices without any communication break. So currently, even for now, the switching between the cellular system and the Wi-Fi system, some kind of what can I say? Stop time. Yes, some kind of problem. Yes, so it is good to provide the cellular system continuously there so that we can provide a stable communications. So those kind of we need to consider the many kind of things for the HETnet systems, the complexity point of view and the service continuity, service stability point of view, and also cost revenue. Yeah.
Okay, Uli. Then we'll see if we can get another question, if you can get...
Yeah, I assume that was also not a very serious proposal on a new standard organization, because the paradigm of design is a very different one. So, of course, what is extremely important is that we maintain the continuity of the control service between the different radio technologies. That's sort of primordial, and we did maybe not an ideal job at the beginning. So multi-rad, as soon as there is a 6G icon on your device, it must be better than if it is only 5G. Okay, and that of course means that a 6G service almost always is a carrier aggregation of the carrier with the lower, which we now have. And of course, there is heterogeneous networks on the level of management. Certainly, I think, and things are happening, and many services they don't demand that at the transition from an area where you have Wi-Fi, you have a bigger service break going from one Wi-Fi hotspot to the other than anything else. So that is not so critical. There was some other point, but I forgot now.
William doesn't look convinced, but I think we'll have to leave it there. Let's try and get one further question in. There was a hand right at the very back, please. And then I've got one question online, which we'll take, then we end. Okay.
Thank you. I'm Jasper Panzer. I'm with the UK's Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. At the very start of the IMT 2030 framework that was published by the ITU, we have the section on motivation and societal consideration, and that sets out a number of important societal expectations that we have for 6G around reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing energy consumption, supporting technology that supports the best possible coverage, and many other expectations. Now that we move into the technical work in 3GPP, what can we do to ensure that those societal considerations are being taken on board in the development of the first 6G release? Thank you.
That's really interesting because it aligns entirely with the question that's been asked online. So we cover them both. So how do we match the desire to deliver really compelling new innovative solutions, but at the same time keep in mind sustainability and societal goals? Do you want to start, Angeliki?
So as I tried to explain also in my statement, the idea is to include these metrics as KPIs and KVIs from the beginning. So energy efficiency and cost and affordability and how really the wireless environment looks like and what this means in terms of energy consumption or in terms of emission, etc. This is what we do. I mean, in many of the design of the algorithms already. So I think that's
Okay.
a start.
And does this feature in the pre-standards work that you're doing, David? Are you taking into account the sustainability aspects when you're developing the building blocks?
Well, very much so. If you look at the building block technologies, they all point towards these KVIs. So if you're looking for coverage, if you're looking for sustainability or ubiquitous coverage, sustainability, security, you've got these big six, which I think dropped out of the SA1 workshop as well. All of the technology, so the underlying technologies need to point to these northern stars, if you like, and say, okay, does this do security by design? Is this as energy efficient and material efficient as possible? Does this ensure coverage at a reasonable cost energy and rollout as well? So all of the technical building blocks, we need to always point up to these values, if you like, which come out of the European projects, Hexa X1, Hexa X2, all of these research projects, they're pointing not only to KPIs, but KVIs as well.
Okay, anything to add from Takahiro or Ulrich? Ulrich, very quickly, because Dan's getting animated in the corner. So.
Yeah, I think this is a very important and right point. It's very difficult to nail this down when it really comes to the technical evaluation. So after the framework document of the ITU, now we have the technical performance requirement document, and then we get much more down to bits and so on. How do we, the ambition, let's say, of our customers is that the network in 2030 consumes totally less energy than the network in 2020. And then we get into not only the technology as such, that the efficiency of the radio interface, but the densification and all that. We have tried to study this a lot. Of course, it's an ambition that you have a linear behavior, but I don't think that we have a clear conclusion yet how this will be measured if we have a technical document that comes to run 1 or so. Where we can measure spectral efficiency that we insert that. I think this is something that the standardization organization has to do still when it comes below this intention level to this quantitative level. I think there is a job to do still. Thanks.
Okay, Takahiro.
Yep, that is yes. I said that pre-standardization pre-standardization activity is needed. Actually, the Japanese 6G organizations, Beyond 5G Promotion Consortium, has already studied and summarized the KPIs and the target requirements already. And maybe other organizations also did a similar thing. So maybe it is good to compare the KPI and the requirement and try to find a nice way to define the requirement to be treated in the 3GPP or ITOR. That could be very useful for the smooth standardization in the future.
Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking this excellent panel.
So yeah, thank you so much to our panel, and thank you very much to Adrian as well for guiding us through the discussion there. Sorry to cut things a little bit short, but I know our next session, which is going to be starting straight away now, we do actually have a hard stop for some of our speakers in that. So yes, so just whilst we change things around here, as I said, we are going to be moving straight on to our next session. So the next session is titled A New Digital Revolution, Harnessing the Transformative Potential of 6G and Other Emerging Technologies. So as well as 6G, there's a number of other technologies that really are developing fast. You look at AI, you look at quantum and things like that. So a discussion is going to be around that and looking at how all those are going to come together for a future ecosystem to be developed. So again, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers. So if I can invite our moderator and speakers for this session to come up on the stage. So that's Simon Fletcher and also Catherine Schilberg and Joe Butler, who are here with us. And I think we also have Wen Tong, who is going to be joining us virtually as well. So if I can invite you to all make your way up onto the stage. Yes, so Simon is going to be moderating the session and then also providing us with some introductory remarks to set the scene as well. So we have our speakers here. As I said, hopefully we have Wen Tong with us here as well, joining virtually. If we could bring him up on the screen as well. And yeah, we'll get things started. So Simon, I will pass over to you, and we'll go from there. Yes, Wen Tong here as well. Hello, Wen Tong.
Hi.
Hi.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I'm speaking, some of you in the room with various hats on. Today I'm going to be speaking as a board member of the Wireless World Research Forum. I am, in my day job, the CEO of a company called Real Wireless. So wireless is very close to my heart. But first of all, I've got a presentation just to talk through some of the themes that I think we should be considering. Slide sets are going to come up. The forum is the Wireless World Research Forum is very interesting. It's been going since the early days of 3G standardization. I think I can see some nods of recognition in the house, and has continued on its mission really to look longer term. It's very much focused on research. So some commonality in terms of the thinking that we've had from the previous panel, but we're thinking perhaps stretching a bit beyond just the definition of 6G, and seeing whether other innovative ideas around wireless can converge into the 6G concepts that may land in the standard in the later 2020s timeframe. So the way I'm going to take you through the story here is really just a research ecosystem model, such as this forum, is very much about researcher to researcher contact. Of course, researchers generate output in terms of papers and engagement in conferences, but a lot of the value created in such a forum as this is traveling the globe, trying to understand how different economies, how different societies are using wireless systems, and how they want to get value from wireless systems going forward. And so I'm going to take you through sort of the journeys of just the last couple of years that the forum's been on in terms of the conversations it's had. But the forum in the last year had meetings, virtual and physical. For example, a lot of our members are universities and institutes who are looking at the next generation, training up the next generation of researchers. And so what is an interesting feature of the forum is engaging with emerging markets, where there's a much more increased or heightened interest and understanding of how wireless systems are becoming fundamental to the economic success of economies. And that growth in interest, a lot of it helped through the very wide dissemination of the hopes of 5G has created a global awareness in terms of mobile and wireless systems. So here last year, we started with a meeting in Poland. We had a meeting in Singapore, and there was also engagement in Ecuador as well. But what's interesting in these meetings is they're quite organic in terms of understanding what are the emerging themes in each of these markets. So I've highlighted, as we go through these 4 slides, a number of technology areas or themes that are emerging from those local markets. We try not to do a top-down, this is what 3GPP say, therefore we must promote that out conversation. This is very much, what is the ecosystem around in this country, these institutes, these researchers, what do they think is important from their perspective? And then we discuss those topics within the forum. So, for example, in Singapore, a very clear messaging around sustainability, Open RAN, AI, connected vehicles. And the other one that perhaps we need to reflect on when we're thinking about 6G, where 5G perhaps dropped the ball to some extent, was around the benefits for health. There's a lot of emerging markets where connecting the community, connecting remote and rural communities to health systems is actually quite important for them. And perhaps the 5G value proposition was a little bit weak on how to roll out health-based systems. But a lot of the typical items that were identified through those meetups last year, automated communications, of course, AI is there as we'd expect and anticipate, but I think the automated networks was very much driven by the thought process in emerging markets around that there aren't so many skilled people in those markets who can deploy and maintain and operate networks. Perhaps if there's more automation in systems and there's zero touch thinking in terms of the deployment, then maybe they're going to be able to address some of the emerging market needs. Senses emerges. Perhaps this Internet of Senses concept is a little bit first world, so to speak, and high-level economy thinking, perhaps, but because we don't get a great sense of that from emerging markets as such, but it's definitely there. A lot of the emerging markets understand the concept or think they understand the concept and want to engage in open networks. What does open networks mean? There's a great deal of interest or understanding of the value of the engineering of products and solutions in this industry. And there's a recognition that if the systems are closed and there's a limited choke point in terms of the vendors that can address the deployment of systems, then what is the opportunity for local researchers and development activities to happen in other markets? So open networks is quite a strong concept that many understand and recognize. And terahertz is there as well as an interesting theme coming through. The forum publishes, and Internet of Things has been a staple theme for many a year in the forum, and I fully appreciate the messaging from Nakamura-san around, thank you very much, swap of hardware. IoT and 5G, they didn't quite converge in terms of value proposition. I see William Webb in the audience who championed IoT systems for many a year as well, and there are many standards out there for IoT systems. One suspects that 5G struggled to gain traction in such a diverse standards domain in IoT, but it clearly, IoT as a concept benefits very much from wireless connectivity. There's some interesting discussions around the concept of self-building networks. What does that mean? I mean, I think we're a long way away from having robots rolling out networks and deploying them themselves, but these are the sort of thought processes that stimulate researchers who are thinking about how to do things differently, how to deploy networks, how to configure networks in different ways going forward. So perhaps robots deploying networks of the future is possible. Let's have a discussion about that. There's clearly an interest in the forum in terms of evaluating or understanding the limitations of the wireless technologies. So the forum has been involved in the IMT activities, evaluating the emerging 5G wireless technologies, and no doubt it will continue to do so through the resource of the universities who have clearly got a lot of capability in modeling and simulation of systems. WRC engagement for the WWRF is very important, actually. There's a lot of interesting discussions that happen in that ecosystem. especially the WRC 23 last year, engaging in some of the broader conversations with Anoy-san, Director of ITUT, Secretary General, etc. So understanding where these emerging markets and the trends are going to influence how wireless systems evolve, and also a meeting with the Indian Minister of Communications as well. So continuing that engagement with India. So ITU, again, some engagement and submission of papers actually to the Working Party 5D activities and IMT 2030 vision. A number of themes came out in terms of promoting from the wider research community, this Internet of Senses again, intelligent future networks, again coming back to this health-related angle, which is important for the emerging markets, and then of course this theme around the 100 gigahertz and above related spectrum again. Some wider, there's not just the purely wireless ITU angles, there's some broader digital transformation agendas within ITU. And the area that we thought was of particular interest to engage in at this stage is the Smart Sustainable Cities program, U4SSC, and connected vehicles. So one of the speakers today will talk about connected vehicles. So the steering board of the forum is taken from pretty much all of the globe that's engaged in the conversations around wireless systems, and the forum engages widely with the likes of 16G, YETSI activities, looking at sensing and terahertz and AI. Indian standards bodies, again, terahertz, interesting for the India ecosystem, and ECC and IEEE. So all the players who are influencing the way in which motivation for longer term research in wireless is happening, we collaborate with and try to identify those themes. So there's a 6G positioning paper under development within the forum. And surely, I think everyone here says, haven't we had enough of 6G vision papers already? And the answer probably is yes, but important point here is we've already said 6G and beyond in this conversation piece in this paper. So we, from a research perspective, 2030 is a blink of an eye. So we're really thinking about some of the messaging that came out from the operator community already saying, well, we need stability in terms of hardware platforms, overlaying software functionality. That's fine. Some of the technologies that we're looking at here maybe require refresh in hardware, it's possible. So perhaps they come in a 6G advanced phase, which is in the 2035 period. It's quite possible. When you're setting a research agenda for the longer term research community, then a 10-year event horizon is fine. I mean, it stretches to some extent the credibility in terms of it having industrial impact, but there are many ways of doing research, including curiosity-driven research, cross-domain, cross-disciplinary research activities. These take time for the research ecosystem to gel and to start driving the ideas. So 6G and beyond is the positioning that the WWRF is thinking about now. And we're being quite careful not to alight too much on particular technologies, and being quite keen to engage with these global bodies that are thinking more about society benefit and impact as part of the high-level value proposition of the conversation. So you see sustainability and societal impact there are our top items on the list. And we are getting, again, Nakamura-san mentioned that in Japan there are issues around having a secure and resilient network. So we're trying to understand what those properties are around sort of transparency, accountability, trustworthiness of network, security and privacy. What do they mean concretely in terms of technologies and approaches to technology? And so we continue to look at those areas. We'll engage with and be very interested in how the 6G ecosystem evolves. But I think most of what the forum is looking at now is understanding these development directions on a regional government level to help us shape the research agenda. So I've got 3 topics or 3 key questions on the panel discussion, which we will talk through as we go through into the panel. These questions will come back up when we're in the panel, so I don't want to dwell on them too much, other than to say that I think from a forum perspective, we always want to sort of take what lessons learned from the 5G perspective and say, what did we get right? What could we do better? As this session is very focused on technologies, then are there some key technologies that we need to really hang our hats on at this stage in terms of the value creation of technology and that potential? And I think a very important point, especially when we're talking at a government and ministry level, and of course they will no doubt outsource some of the management of the evolution of networks to their regulators, different approaches to regulation globally. But there will always be some policy and regulation stakeholders who should be influencing how systems are evolving for the benefit of that local market. And we need to see whether we've got that base well covered at this stage. Okay, so that's it from me. And then I'm going to hand over to each of our panelists just to talk for 4 or 5 minutes or so, give an opening statement, and then we'll have our open discussion. So I think, Catherine, are you going to come up here? You're more than happy. I like to stand and lecture from the lecture, but others have a different view. Okay. Okay, super. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks.
Catherine.
Yes, great. Thanks for inviting me to this very exciting forum. It has been a very, very interesting day so far. So I work at the Volvo Group. So everything you see with a Volvo logo onto it, except for the cars. That's the company that I work for. So trucks, buses, yellow machines, boat engines, and so on. So we are not dealing with the cars. They were sold to Ford in 1999 and later acquired by Geely some years ago. So I work at a business unit inside the Volvo Group called Volvo Autonomous Solutions. So we are responsible for bringing autonomous trucks to public roads and autonomous machines and trucks to confined areas. And as you know, we are not earning any money on this yet, but I will provide a little bit glimpse on what we are doing. But I would also like to lower the expectations. I will not provide some 6G visions. We are still working quite much with 4G. We are slowly picking up on 5G, but we have some lessons learned we are using it private networks. So I will start with a slide showing a little bit the expected lifetime of vehicles. The telecom industry compared to the automotive industry is going with the speed of light. No pun intended, but to be honest, when I started in the automotive industry, I thought that why can't we change things, tomorrow or in a year or something? And I said, Catherine, you need to lower your expectations on how fast we can move. So, an expected lifetime of a vehicle is 13 years, and the automotive components making up a vehicle that is 13-year-old has probably the major design decisions were taken already 16 years ago. So So, for example, if you are driving a car from 2017, the major design decisions were probably made already 5 years before. So we are moving really, really slowly. When we want to change a component in our vehicles, we have processes, I could say, generally speaking, for the automotive industry, it starts with RFI, RFQs. That's a process in itself. Then we have a supplier award. Then it takes like 3 to 5 years before we have awarded the supplier until we are exchanging something or put it into manufacturing. And this is something that you need to keep in mind when you're dealing with the automotive industry. And as I write here, the automotive component can have a lifetime of up to 20 years. So why this long lifetime on components and our products? Yeah, it's complex products, and it's first and foremost also the product needs to be safe. That's the paramount, right? So we have a lot of quality processes throughout the supply chain, in our factories, and so on. Can we be quicker? Probably, but the industry, we are quite conservative. I've learned the hard way. I'm a quite energetic person, and I like to that things are changing a little bit faster, but it is conservative, and we are a little bit reluctant to change in processes that we can rely upon that brings the safe vehicles. Also, the regulation surrounding vehicles, we have what in Europe what we call the type approval framework, and it looks very different compared to the CE marking, and that is a quite cumbersome product when we want to update an existing product that we have on the market. And I don't want to go into details on that. It's much easier to be under the CE marking scheme. Okay, so automated driving on public roads. We had over a decade ago, the automotive industry promised a lot, right? We will remove the driver. 90% of all accidents is attributed to the human driver. And I think it would have been strange if it would have been 90% attributed to the vehicle. So if we just remove the driver, we will have 0 accidents, 0 incidents. The problem is that it is more challenging than we anticipated. We started out with a very large operational design domain. We wanted the vehicles, to drive exactly the same way we are driving, rural roads, highways, in all weather conditions, and so on. And the million-dollar question for our industry is, okay, so when is an automated vehicle safe enough to be put out on the streets? What we can see in the car industry is that they have sort of gone back a little bit to, advanced driver features. That we have some car brands in Europe. They are providing a highway pilot, for example, in nice weather conditions on a stretch of road that the vehicle really knows. The truck industry is working in the US, in the Sun Belt, nice weather, long stretches of road, not a lot of exit and entrance ramps, and for hub-to-hub operation to remove the drivers for addressing driver shortage. So there was a very high expectation on the automotive industry during the 5G and the beginning of the 5G that the automotive industry would be a new revenue stream, right? I mean, it was the IoT, it was the health sector, and it was also the automotive industry. And I think that we were not part of of course, we were part of some of the really interesting research project back then, but I also think that we didn't do our homework fully. So in an automated vehicle, all architectures, the architecture internally, regardless if it's a truck, machine, or if it's a passenger car, is that we are moving towards a centralized architecture. We have a quite, powerful sort of brain keeping track of all the sensors and so on that is executing a lot of things. So for the propulsion of the automated vehicles, connectivity per se is not necessary to have. But of course, when you are on a public road, they need to be connected to the network. So they need to report back home, for example, where they are. Then there is also a use case where, I've run far away out of my time. Yeah, autonomous machines and trucks in confined areas. I just want to say we are using 5G private networks. Sorry, Dan. Yes. What I want to say, so we have been working a lot with the 5G private networks, and of course we are looking eagerly forward to having a harmonized spectrum across Europe for our One thing that is very important for our industry is the legal certainty on spectrum. You cannot say that, from a couple of years from now on that you will not have access to this spectrum. Then you will never see us invest in things. I just want to point out on this slide that 100 million vehicles every year are put on the market worldwide, all vehicle categories. They have an expected lifetime of 13 years. Approximately 100 million mobile phones, tablets, laptops, and so on are put on the market every month. And the expected lifetime is 3 years. So we are really living in different ages. Yes, and I hope that I can show my co-worker Bob. Is it okay? Even though I have run out of time.
Let me tell you about Bob. He is the best friend a person like me can have. I never thought I could have a friend like Bob. When he first came here, I showed him around. I liked him immediately. He was a no-nonsense go-getter, just like me. We did everything together, every day. It was like when you're a child and you get a new best friend. He didn't talk too much. He didn't have to. It was the best of times. But then something changed.
Bob, the shift is over. Are you coming?
He started working. I mean, really working, never stopping. I tried to reach out to tell him that it's okay to take a break once in a while. I invited him to lunch. I'm afraid something bad happened, and he's using work to forget about it. Maybe someone left him, or maybe he has gambling issues. My wife always asks me, you know he's a machine, right? Not a person? I do know, yes. He's a machine. Maybe.
I'll see you tomorrow. Maybe we can have lunch together. If you want. Maybe.
I haven't given up hope yet. That we still can be friends. I just like him so much.
This is the autonomous truck, one of the things that we want to bring to the market in confined areas. But I just wanted to show you because he's so sweet, I think. But he's connected as well.
Hi, everybody. So I've got to follow Bob. I've never followed a truck before, so it's a first. So hello, thank you, Simon, and thank you, Ofcom and Forum Global for having me to speak. It's great to be here today. I am from a UK national technology organisation called the Digital Catapult. We work across advanced technology areas like 5G, 6G, AI, IoT, immersive, and quantum. And we seek to enable the benefits of technologies to be supported and adopted within the UK, exploited for the benefit of UK industries, citizens, and society. So we've had lots and lots of conversations today already about 6G. I'm not going to be talking in great detail to the use cases, not least because these slides that you see up here are not my slides. They're from a recent workshop in Rotterdam. And so with thanks to those whose use cases they actually are, I'm just going to put them as a backdrop to talk to. We've talked already, a number of people have already talked about the previous Gs and learning lessons from 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, with some Gs being more successful than others. That sounds a bit like voodoo to me. I've never been entirely convinced by that, but 2G was clearly the first globally adopted, widespread standard. 4G was really, I think of it as the true internet in your pocket, with IP protocols, networks, broadband and spectrum, and demand all coming together, which played a part in its success. So 5G was promised now over a decade ago, really to be the ultimate network for all applications, beyond just consumers to industries, with a hugely flexible physical layer, able to cover all the different types of applications, from massive machine-to-machine to super low latency, high bandwidth applications, and more. And arguably, and this is a fairly sweeping generalization, 5G has reached consumers on their mobile, although mostly in non-standalone form at this point, but it hasn't really reached, at least, at scale, the industrial applications yet, what used to be called the verticals. So I think, as others have observed here, as we look forwards to 6G, we really do need to look at what's worked from previous generations and what lessons we've got to learn. So while we're still at an early stage of development of 6G, there is increasing alignment around what 6G will address, and these images really show some of the use cases that have been presented at the recent workshop on use cases in Rotterdam. I think the use cases and capabilities that are discussed at the workshop really still have quite a lot of ambition within them. So we're talking about, well, ultra reliable communications, which is a phrase coined in 5G, has become hyper reliable communications, having sensing embedded within the communications layer, using terahertz radio spectrum bands, and potentially being a radically lower energy system. All of those things over and above some of the, the other conversations that have been talked through today in terms of capabilities and use cases. These are hugely important, exciting ambitions and areas of research and development, but they really do imply quite radical change from where we are, especially given timescales of 2030 being really just around the corner. So I think this does raise the question when we look forwards, which of these are going to arrive when? What's the priority going to be? Or does everything arrive all at once, which would be no mean feat? So do the timescales of these promised developments really match industry sector needs and readiness, and also the pace of wider technology developments beyond simply 5G, 6G networks, such as immersive displays, AI, etc. So I think ensuring alignment is going to be key to the success and impact of 6G. And when I was asked to talk at this panel, it was described in the blurb as looking at some of the innovative applications that could emerge. So immersive telepresence, hyper-connected cities, real-time remote surgery, next-generation robotics were the cases that were put down. And I think probably everybody in this audience recognizes that those use cases are really the same as the 5G use cases posited a decade or so ago. And clearly there is a really significant overlap from the 5G ones, even if they are more stretching and they go further. But actually, in those use cases, I think I would concur there's actually a huge amount of progress that has occurred on the journey, but at really quite difficult to predict rates that weren't really understood or able to be understood at the outset of the standardization activity. Clearly, though, none of them have really arrived in the same way as 4G is the internet in your pocket. So in immersive telepresence, for example, we haven't seen widespread adoption of VR and AR. Headset and display technologies that really drive adoption at scale simply haven't really come to fruition at this point. And certainly, there's relatively little integration with 5G. So things simply haven't progressed for that to be driving 5G. Yet, we have seen, I think, phenomenal advances in real-time understanding of the environment through AI and data. Spatial operating systems have arrived. I think, going beyond large language models, foundation-level vision models will only accelerate the pace. So we have seen quite significant developments in those areas, and there is huge investment in that space looking forwards to the 2030 timescales. Similarly, in remote surgery, which is a phenomenally ambitious use case to be positing, and I certainly raised an eyebrow at it in 2013 or so when I first got involved with 5G. Tactile internet devices, precision robotics approaches, AI developments all need to mature and be co-developed for those sorts of use cases to work alongside the 5G and 6G infrastructure. So we've explored a number of the use cases that were posited for 5G at the Digital Catapult. We have built 2 advanced media production studios. These are standalone 5G-enabled studios, one in the north of England, one in the south of England, connected by very low latency, high-capacity networks. They enable exploration of advanced digital productions, think special effects for things like Star Wars, etc., and things like simultaneous geographically distributed production. So with actors potentially in different locations, being in the same scene, but acting in different geographies, and exploration of generative AI approaches. So this use case, I would contend, isn't so different to remote telepresence and some of the metaverse applications that we envisage. We've also run something that was called a 5G festival, where members of a pop band gave a concert from different places simultaneously over 5G wireless networks and very low latency networks. So we had a singer, for example, in the O2, an arena here in the UK, drummer and guitarist in separate locations, a drummer in Brighton, and a guitarist in a London recording studio. And they were all able to play and give a concert simultaneously, which is quite a challenging thing. And if you look over the commercial 5G networks at this point, I suspect the latency probably wouldn't enable this. For information, a drummer can just about work at 20 milliseconds latency, 10 milliseconds even better, 40 milliseconds no go. So we have built use cases for experimentation. But to be honest, we've had to, because the technology and use cases have evolved alongside the network evolution, we've had to put the standalone 5G networks in place ourselves, as the infrastructure's not there yet. The 5G devices in these, what used to be called vertical sectors, aren't there yet in the market to serve these verticals. Indeed, the industry verticals, particularly of film production, don't really want to use wireless. They don't trust it. So there's an amount of work that needs to be done with that community to ensure that they are part of the journey. So finally, I suppose the other thing that I would notice is we've had to build the consortia to do these sorts of things. So for example, in the music space, we had to work with Warner Brothers and bring them into essentially what is a project to develop the business cases, use cases, and make sure the technology is seamless. And that work is hard, and it really is a very singular part of, I think, the technology that's going to be used for wireless generations to be uptaken into industrial sectors. So there's a huge amount of work in that space, obviously, but I think it's very, very valuable. I'll touch on one other important aspect I think that others, again, have mentioned already at this stage. We see is playing a part in the success of 6G, which is open networking approaches and an open ecosystem. So to draw a parallel to deep learning, so deep learning, very similar timescales, really the origins of deep learning to the origins of 5G. I would say they've taken a very different approach. They obviously would do, and they're in a very different situation as we look at where we are now. So it's been around for similar timescales, but it's essentially a very open source, open research-based approach, and it's flourished at speed, I would say, partly because of that. So even, for example, now with the advent of foundation models, with vast training costs, these open approaches are still flourishing and enabling a market of use cases to evolve and develop. So established companies and startups can take an open source AI model from a platform, for example, which many of you will know, called Hugging Face on the internet. It's fully trained, the academic papers are there, usage examples are there, all in one place. So you can simply pick it up and exploit it for your business case. You can go now there, take a look. There's thousands and thousands of AI models ready to go. You can find Meta's most recent and most sophisticated language model. It's called Llama 3. It's there. It's open. It's completely open source. It's trained on 15 trillion token data set across 24,000 GPUs. So huge investments, but still in an open approach and openly available. So that to me feels like something that is going to support the ecosystem and the use cases. So in the UK, we've built our Sonic Labs facility with thanks to the Department for Science and Technology in this country, DSIT, who have funded us, which is focused primarily on open approaches for this reason. So it's looking at open networking, technologies and vehicles like Open RAN. It works across 3 areas of London with both an outdoor and an outdoor network, as well as indoor testing facilities. And it's done in partnership with UK regulator Ofcom. So it's really looking at how standards evolve, some of the challenges associated with those sorts of approaches in this market, and how open systems and that evolution of the market is going to look, as well as how it enables AI and AI to come into the network, and AI actually plays a role within the network and some of the challenges there in terms of trustworthiness, understandability, and confidence. So we see open networking approaches, open interfaces, and multi-rat technologies as really a likely part of the success here, and how that interplays with the evolution of the 6G standard is quite an important aspect. So I'd say 5G, just to finish off, I think 5G has had a revolution in terms of the capabilities that are offered within the standard. That's there, but it's progressed at a more evolutionary pace in terms of implementation. So limiting factors like market demand, investment, deployment, business models for adoption, but also the pace at which new sectors and users and industries can adopt new technology, all limit the pace at which different parts of the standard and the network are actually needing to be available. So I think nobody in an existing vertical sector can just have a network arrive and be dropped on them, out of space. They want cost-effective devices and a supportive ecosystem that solves the problems with them. And then they can do things that they couldn't do before, either faster, cheaper, or better. And solving some of these problems is hard, and you can imagine a heterogeneous approach to the users and these verticals in wanting to solve these problems. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. But if I can just sort of finish on a sort of slightly more optimistic note, I think, which is, I think if you look forward to 2030, these technologies, allied technologies like vision-based, multimodal foundation models are going to be very mature in 2030. Spatial operating systems, which govern headset use, AR, VR, are going to be functionally very, very much more capable. And display technologies and robotics are getting phenomenal amounts of investment and are moving actually at really quite fast pace. So I do think that poses the possibility here for 6G, depending what it's like, is it the right network actually at the right time? And maybe the even Gs do have it. That's me.
Thank you. Can we have Wen Tong?
Yes.
So just your opening statement, and then we'll get into the panel.
Okay. Thank you, Simon, for having me here. As we are all seeing the upcoming of a 6G wireless, many speakers before me have talked about this in very excellent, and it's a potential great impact on a large number of verticals. But here, I would like to take this opportunity for this panel to bring up the AI revolution. So this was enabled by the large language model-based GPT technology in only past 18 months. It is truly a revolution that we haven't seen since the creation of iPhone. First of all, the large language model-based GPT model will continue to progress over at least next 3-5 years. We will move from the large language model to so-called AI agent this or next year, and then to the AGI, which is that people say this artificial general intelligence. So far, the GPT-4 series of model already been deployed to consumer market, and then GPT-5 may be releasing next year, 2025, and in 2028, we highly likely will have this AGI. So the success of this rapid rise up of AI and the AGI is based on 3 factors. First of all is the so-called scaling law of the model parameters. The bigger, the better. The even bigger as a brain size of a model will have a higher intelligence. So far, the scaling law is still working. The second is the training data set is consumed almost the public available internet data. So it's a big data. The third one is the extra scale of computing power. So we were talking tens of thousands of GPU cores to compute a model. So the state of art of the large LLM, the large language model, is typically about 500 billion of parameters. Remember, the human being is 100 trillion for a brain. The several terabytes size of training data and tens of thousands of GPU cards. These are the standard setup in order to train this model, and how this model related to wireless network and 6G. The key is that the limited computing power in UE, that the user device, will determine how smart the UE by this model standalone service. That means no connectivity. So currently we have like 10 billion parameter model in the smartphone will release this year. So for the time frame, for example, 2030 to 35, if Moore's law still progress, we will probably have 100 billion model. So even a mouse has a 250 billion, parameters. So the clever of a device by standalone computing of the the AI model will be not that smart. So in this case, in order to deliver the human level intelligence to every device anywhere at any time, we must have some network to play this role. So that 5G and 6G will do this. In this sense, the ultimate goal for 6G is to connect intelligence, because the intelligence, the AI that we haven't seen now will amplify not only one sector, but maybe all sectors in terms of efficiency. Then be specific in the 6G network, will be critical to enable AI with 3 aspects. The first aspect is the size of the model will be distributed across network. So of course, in the data center, we will have super intelligence, not even human level. But then on the edge, we need also deployment of a medium-sized model. Of course, the device has a certain model for carry on. This is the model distribution in terms of computing, and then like 6G will inherently with some computing network. I'm talking about global network for distributed computing, and they all computing the neural network, not as probably the cloud as we see today. So the second part is the sensing data for 6G that will be organic for the model training data set. And then because if the AI is interacting with the physical world, we need a certain so-called, in AI community, this is called a world model. So you need the large language model to conduct alignment to the physical world or to deliver the service. So sensing data, not only for the training, but as well, it's the alignment of the physical world in order to make a AI service at a specific time and the point of space of time to deliver. So the third aspect is the computing and the leverage of the data, how to share the data or model, and then for the privacy of the data and trustworthy of all this, likely in the end of the day, the network will only communicate with transmit model rather than the data or raw data. The last point I want to put here, which is very important, is that we envision 5G and 6G will get into every verticals. That's the vision. So the real value for large language model based AI is its ability to interface with the end user through pure natural language. This is not only for the running phase, that you interact the model with the language to run the model, to run the application. The end user can interact the AI without specific knowledge. You can use certain technology or service. More importantly, this model allows to develop the APP for use natural language. That means the APP software development step will potentially be skipped or bypassed. So that is the bottleneck of today, to apply many verticals, and you need to develop each and every software to suitable to that vertical. This is the current 5G bottleneck for penetration of the vertical. So if the vertical user can interact with a 5G, let's say, or 6G use a natural language, then we will solve this slow adoption in terms of it vertical. So because they are the niche market compared to the consumer market, as what to say. So that will eliminate these barriers. So I think in summary, we see the AGI will revolutionize 6G wireless, and they will emerge together in the same time frame, and it's a nice intercept with these two disruptive technology, and I think it will be prevail to all the vertical altogether. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking to the back of the hall, Dan, or somebody to guide me. I'm assuming we can have 20 minutes, although we're a little behind. Is that okay? Thank you very much. So if you reset the clock to 20. I'll start with some conversation pieces briefly in the panel, but I'm happy to take hands from the audience as well. We may or may not get my final slide back up. While the AV team are grappling with that, I'll just talk you through where I think we need to go on this conversation, given our 20 minutes. So the first one, the first question, which I said was around just lessons learned from 5G. I think mostly I'm going to talk to Catherine about that. The next one will be on the value creation through technology. So are we right to be thinking about technology driving value? There's a conversation to be had if you talk with analysts who work in cities who look at vertical sectors and always point to the telco crowd and say, these guys are much too technology driven already. But anyway, okay. I think that's just the culture of the way we operate. And the final thing will be on policy and regulation, which can be a more wider discussion. So on the first one, Catherine, I was very taken, just your message to us that it takes time to work through these communications platforms, and you're still working in private 4G network land, which is interesting. Joe and I worked on a study 7 years ago, whatever it was, Joe, in the National Infrastructure Commission, where transport systems was identified as one of the priority investment areas for 5G from a UK government perspective. So, Catherine, I'm interested in your activities looking at connectivity in your sector. Do you see, I mean, where do you see that your journey? Could you imagine a skip 5G and go straight to 6G scenario here? Or will you naturally progress through the 5G technology space before you get into a conversation about 6G?
Yes. Yep. I'm on. Yeah, so I think that, I mean, it depends on where we're looking. If we look at the public road vehicles, right? I mean, they are connected. So the commercial vehicle sector, they have connected their products for over 2 decades. And now we can see that the passenger cars, more and more passenger cars are also picking up on the technology. I don't think that we will skip 5G. We have planned for 5G, right? Even though like I pointed out on my slide, right? When we will introduce 5G, but 4G is good enough for us now, given the applications. I think it's interesting. I just want to connect because I'm very passionate about ITS, Intelligent Transport Systems, and my background is in road traffic safety and enhancing safety by using connectivity. I see one major problem with the ITS or the ecosystem around transporting is that, okay, we have more and more vehicles that are connected. The problem is that different governments and different cities and so on, they choose, some specific ways of sharing data and things. And the problem for us is that we put products on 190 markets. We want to see more collaboration, across cities and across, for example, for Europe. I think that is really, if we want to offer a new service that increases efficiency or safety in urban scenarios, then we want to sell, or we want to have that service across the whole Europe, right? We cannot just say, yeah, let's launch it in Sweden or in UK. Because our products cross the borders every day. I think that's a major thing. I think we have technology for, 4G and 5G for enabling the ecosystem, but we need to start to work on the applications. How can we share data? How can, we in an efficient way pick up data for our products and also share data with the, so I think technology-wise, we are perfectly fine, but we are definitely on different planets when we are working together with, cities and governments and so on. But yeah, the cities are not moving between cities.
So can I just, you mentioned you had the term centralized architecture. When you said that, were you referring to the architecture, system architecture within the vehicle, or were you encompassing the cloud and into the network? How do you architect your systems? I guess mostly they want them to be autonomous. So if they're not connected, they don't, just stop.
No, there was in the beginning of the dawn of 5G, there was like, okay, if we don't put up 5G networks, we will not see autonomous vehicles. What I want to say is that decrease that expectation, right? Because we are developing the autonomous driver, it will always be able to propel the vehicle internally. So, what we can see in the automotive industry is that we go to an internal centralized architecture. Today, the manually vehicles are quite distributed. We have a lot of smaller ECUs, but now, it's not sustainable. We cannot just add another ECU because it gets just too complex. So we are moving towards a centralized architecture where, we have one brain, which is containing the autonomous driver. That's what I wanted to say. It's an internal architecture thing. The connectivity is needed because we want to keep track of the autonomous vehicles, of course. And we want to be able to support them if they are coming into a tricky traffic situation. And remote driving is something that we can be talking for hours as well on. So I will leave it for now. Yeah.
I'm quite interested in your 4 vision diagrams. I know you credited a workshop elsewhere, so they're not the intellectual property of the Catapult as such. But I was taken by all 4 images, Joe, were of cityscapes. And one of them was noticeable, and I don't think I saw any cars. They were people walking down the street with augmented reality. So, the connected vehicle agenda within cities maybe is going against the trend in some major cities where they want to reduce the number of vehicles that are in the cities. Interesting tension there. So maybe connected vehicles is a remote and rural agenda and mining scenario rather than dense networks in the middle of cities.
Is this working? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think firstly I didn't select a connected vehicles image, so let's not take that too far. But I think obviously with autonomous vehicles as they actually come and arrive, you've got a set of people on the motorway not driving with plenty of time to do augmented virtual reality or play computer games or read, whatever they want to do. So you still end up in quite a high data situation. And to Wen-Tong's point, I think, which is about actually enabling AI with the network and AI data flowing backwards and forwards in much more real-time ways than is currently the case with AI models. I think that could actually be really quite substantial amounts of data. Wen-Tong talked a lot about large language models. but clearly we are seeing large vision models, and they are 1 or 2 orders of magnitude more complicated, and we're only in the very foothills of those explorations. So 5 years from now, I mean, that's what promotes effectively real-world understanding.
Yeah.
Computers that can see, understand, communicate fluidly with those around them. So that's interesting. That's a high data problem.
Yeah, totally. So Wen-Tong, I'm assuming that in your research groups in Huawei, you're looking at this quite closely now, because you gave a vision, devices, edge, and cloud, and in the context of vehicles, and as Joe said, vision systems running on the device, i.e. the vehicle. Yeah. There could be quite an interesting growth in data, and I'm not sure whether there are very strong projections on this yet, in terms of the AI systems demanding more and more capacity in the networks, where perhaps the people consuming data flattens off, and these automated systems become more of a driver of the capacity needs in the networks. Have you looked at those trends in any detail, Wen-Tong?
Yeah, so thank you. The AI will definitely have an impact on the future network, or from end to end. The first thing is that is not, if we run everything AI as even the let's say even the language model, not alone the visual model, on the OTT level. I'll give you some data. If we transmit a brain level of a model, like 100 trillion or so or less, it will take some 5 terabytes per second in order to 1 second to exchange a brain, let's say, in that application scenario. So for the car-to-car situation, so we must have AI distributed, run in the network because of the latency, number one. Number two, many other issues are the power consumption. So if it is only in that level of intelligence, now we need 8 megawatts to power the data center. So distributed computing is very important for to-vehicle application. And second, the sensing capability in 6G, when even you turn on the throughput, for example, 1% of the as a sensing user for sensing, it might be 3 magnitude order of data that internet in terms of a language, in text in the internet. So for that sensing capability, you basically will have a real-time physical world. That's the world alignment for autonomous driving. So it is a digital real world in the real time for the operator to deliver to the car, or car can sense themselves. So these are the next level of autonomous driving, rather than based on some radar or map things. So it definitely will much in a lot of advanced way to make the even the driving in the city become a reality.
Got a question here that's just come through on the virtual question platform, which I think actually speaks to this point, Wen-Tong. So you could maybe address this, and perhaps you already have to some extent. But there's an observational question here in terms of is it clear how the advances in 6G technology will enhance what's being used as a term, ultra big data capability. So we're moving now beyond big data to ultra big data. So we're already getting into the new superlative terminology and talking about ultras here. So the data architecture is going to be, the data models are going to be changed as a result of the emergence of 6G?
Yes. So the most of raw data will stay local because there will be distributed computing power to translate data into model. But then even to communicate with this model is a chunk of data, very big. So the ultra data that may be in terms of transmitting of the model. But the model has capability to shrink. You know, the transformer can read 10,000 paper, write a 100 line of a message for you. So in that case, so-called token will be in terms of communication will be thousands or 10,000 times compressed. So there are different aspects. On one way, in terms of between model communication, if you use token, it will be hugely compressed. But if you transmit a model, a good model, a human level intelligence model, then it will take a lot of traffic for sure.
Okay, thank you. And Joe's got an input on that one.
So if I can come back to something more prosaic again, I think than so I think the vision of federated AI models being distributed around is very, very likely. I think that's extremely likely. The challenges it brings aren't necessarily just about the 6G standard or the 5G standard for that matter. It's about infrastructure being in the right place at the right time. So if that is the case, then the limiting factor becomes about investment and deployment. It's about having edge capability and having edge evolved networks in your nation state or in the area where you're operating your private 5G or 6G networks. So I think the timescales are challenging, to be clear.
I think it's intriguing. It comes back to a question that William asked about, should there be a meta standard? I do wonder whether these pervasive AI systems will create their by default standards body. So this starts to speak to the final question on the panel in the last 5 minutes about how to regulate and what the policymakers should be thinking about. So we barely touched on, there are many technologies we talked about today, but especially with Joe's background and regulatory background, it'd be quite interesting just to have a think about where enlightened multi-purpose or future-looking regulators should be thinking. And it feels like AI is potentially an important one, but there's obviously spectrum as well. Catherine, you mentioned spectrum as an interesting consideration in the transport system area. So, I mean, Joe, what's your view in terms of it? There seems to be a fresh interest in terms of sharing of spectrum. It always seems to be a hot potato in the telco sector, with everyone wanting to have a carve out of their own spectrum. Are we going to break that?
Yeah, we can always rely on spectrum for some debate. I think this comes to business models, deployment models, and uptake models, really. So, there is a large difference, obviously, between license-exempt approaches, Wi-Fi, and standardized approaches with dedicated spectrum, 3GPP, 4G, 5G. And I think we're at a stage now where technology and wireless technology can share. That's not probably the limiting factors here. What it really comes down to, I think, is enabling enough of many different business models to emerge to enable the market to actually uptake and find the solutions. So, for example, if you want to operate your own private network, that you don't need to be worried about spectrum. But if you still want some dedicated access. So one of the points that was made was for your use case, you need guaranteed spectrum access. You don't want anyone to take it away. So that's completely understandable. And many people would equate that with licensed, but I'm not sure that's right. You can have dedicated access to license exempt bands for a very long time, but you've got to share them. So there's a set of use cases there that may or may not work depending on your geographical circumstances.
Yeah. So, Catherine, have you experimented with that sharing model and thinking about how you could, in the transport sector, get more access to shared spectrum? Is it a model that scares you, or you're quite keen on it?
No, so I'm quite keen on it. If you look at the transport and the ecosystem, increasing efficiency and safety, I mean, there are no clear business models, right? I mean, have a dedicated, licensed spectrum for that one. Who is going to pay for that? And I think it needs to be under a license exempt scheme, right? And we need to have spectrum rules and how we can share such a spectrum efficiently. So I think, if we want to really leverage the ITS and the ecosystem, I think it needs to be a license exempt, definitely.
Okay. So Wentong, does moving to a world of license exempt or less strong licensing models frighten you, or do you think we should be moving that direction?
Yeah, I think there is a tool we are not fully used, maybe the solution in between, that is the slicing, especially the wide area slice the network. So that will cover a lot of vertical with some tailored performance for them, while not using the guaranteed spectrum. But then the unlicensed spectrum will have its own rationale. And today is the Wi-Fi. Dominant success is Wi-Fi, not the 3GPP. Because it's not successful in the unlicensed band.
So, we're going full circle to some extent, because in the first question I mentioned whether we got the slicing agenda right for 5G. One could reflect that perhaps slicing hasn't been a roaring success yet. So maybe the 6G will realise a slicing concept that is more widely adopted. So there's a challenge for the technologists for sure. Okay, apologies everyone, we're running tight, and I can see we've got a double hander in terms of telling me to shut up now. So this is a full press. So I'm going to stop there on the panel and say thank you very much for taking part, ladies and gentlemen. And I think it's coffee break perhaps, but over to Dan.
Yes, thanks very much, Simon, and thanks to our panelists here and to Wentong, who joined us virtually as well. So yeah, we are indeed moving now to our coffee break. We do have, we're delighted to have a closing keynote presentation today from the Minister Julia Lopez. It's going to be at around about 5 o'clock. So because we are running a little bit behind schedule, I would like to try and just cut this coffee break a little bit short, because I think she's on a bit of a tight agenda. So if we could maybe try and cut it to 15 minutes and be back here at about 10 past 4. And then we should be just about then all right for the closing keynotes as well. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you back here in 15 minutes or so. Thank you.
I think we got away.
I'm not so sure, Mum. He's still out there.
Quit being so dramatic.
Game over, Bao. No, we can still make it. Use the bubble gun.
What, are you crazy?
I've run the scenario 21,465 times.
Silly dog wants me to fight demon with bubbles.
Hurry!
Yeah. Calm down.
Told you it would work.
Let's do something else.
Fetch!
Honey, you got it.
Mom, maybe we should slow down a bit.
Don't you start now. I'm winning. Yeah,
Sending. Checking for patching false. No similar false now. Calculating best possible solution.
did you let this happen?
I'm sorry, but according to my calculations, putting your arm in that position was necessary to avoid a fracture on your femoral neck.
Analyzing content bomb. Weakened balance, mineral deficiency, conclusion. Sending prescription.
There you go. Thanks. I've got it. Mom, I'm sorry, but I have to ask, how do you win at fetch?
Guess you don't know everything, do you?
So hello everybody, and welcome back, and I hope everyone managed to grab a coffee. Sorry we did cut that break a little bit short, but trying to catch up time a little bit. And we're back here now for the final panel of today. So we're going to be looking in this final panel at investment and funding, looking at different investment and business models for 6G success. So again, fantastic lineup of speakers here, and delighted to as well to have here with us Mark Eschenberg from Ether Consulting, who's going to be moderating the session. So Mark, welcome. I'll pass over to you.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Dan. Good afternoon to all of you, and thanks for sticking around, not least with the prospect of a closing keynote and some drinks afterwards. In this final panel, the idea is to look at effectively money and where the funding for 6G is going to come from. We talked about standards this afternoon. We talked about Bob, who's probably going to get a honorable mention on every single panel from here onwards. And now we want to talk about investment in 5G, investment in 6G. Many of the mobile operators are probably nearing the end of the 5G investment cycle, at least in Europe. In other parts of the world, that's still ahead of them. And if we're talking about 6G, of course, there's possibly another investment cycle ahead. People always look for killer apps, and they have been for 15 years. Not much has been found. I've heard that FWA is the killer app for 5G, which is worrying. I've heard today that apparently Speedtest is the killer app for 5G. That doesn't quite bring you to invest. So we want to talk a little more today about, why would you possibly invest in 6G, and do you really have to hunt for that killer app, or are there other ways to think about why investment in 6G may be an interesting decision? So to explore these kind of questions, concerns, opportunities, and to look really at the rationale for investing in 6G, I'm very pleased to have a very excellent panel, but also kind of with a lot of different opinions, hopefully, and a lot of different views. I have Mark Henry with us, who's the Technology Strategy Director at BT Group. We have Robert Murrick, who's the Chairperson and Commissioner at Comrec, the Irish regulator. We have Ian Fogg, who's a Director of Network Innovations at CCS Insight. And we have Luigi Ardito, who's the Senior Director of Government Affairs at Qualcomm. I'll ask each of the speakers to give a short 5-minute contribution. I've already warned them that I'll cut them off stringently, but I think we're all in the same spirit of a quick individual contribution. And then we will follow that up with a panel discussion, taking questions from you as an audience, and of course also online. So with that being said, Mark, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. So I look after network strategy and spectrum for BT. 6G will be my 4th G. And in terms of investment, it's going to be a challenge, more of a challenge than any previous generation. In 5G, and we have heard, that 5G hasn't lived up to expectations, but the business case for 5G was the most efficient way to deliver data capacity. Everything else on top was just upside. And it has delivered on that promise. It was the most efficient way. And, my team within BT, together with the rest of the business, we built business case for acquiring spectrum and building a new network. So what's different for 6G? And the challenges are changes in data growth, device tenure, so we'll talk a little bit about, and deployment, which was the same in 5G, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Taken together, that gives us a problem on the investment case, the return on capital employed. So on data growth, since we launched 5G, our data growth in mobile has tripled. But the annual growth rate when we launched is about 50%, and it's now trending down towards 20%. For the UK, is lower based on Ofcom's announcement. And in some ways, well, we're not, revenues aren't going up, but now demand is slowing down. This should make our business case better. But it means there's less demand for our product, less confidence in the future that people will pay more for it. So that will be a challenge. And my team do the forecasting. We've done a piece of work looking at where future growth might come from out to 2040, and looked at things like distributed large language models, and I don't buy it. I don't think, well, okay, I think about distributed foundational models as an app update. And we already do game updates across the network, massive downloads, which cause problems. But I need to be convinced that foundational models need to be updated in real time, because that comes with a massive cost. And I just don't see why you need to do it in real time. So I'm really struggling with why you need that, when I've just seen GPT 4.0 last week do real world imagery, understanding of seeing, and that's just in the cloud and running on a smartphone, just like most applications do today. So we won't invest on that basis for sure. And then, there are other things, and I'm running out of time, but connected vehicles, they don't actually add that much in terms of traffic. More high mobility users doing more stuff. It's not that much of a big problem compared to 80% of our traffic is video. Video is eyeballs. Extended reality is the same eyeballs, but they might just need a slightly higher bit rate, not hundreds of megabits per second. So there is no exponential data growth unless you choose a small exponent. On deployment, if you look at the roof of this building, there's a 3 gigahertz antenna. It's on a separate pole from the other antenna. That was a big cost on 5G. We went to site to build a second pole, a second structure. We don't want to do that again in 6G. And in fact, that will really hurt us. So not every site has two antenna positions, but we just doubled the antenna positions. We definitely don't want to do that again. We have interleaved antennas now, which simplifies the deployment. Single pole, they're very big and very heavy. So in terms of deployment, it's got to be simple, because if it's not affordable, we're just not going to do it that way. And that's very much a kind of technology choice and implementation, but we should think about that in the system design. Deployment is a massive problem. And this is quite a European parochial view. I did go to Korea, and I would love to have 2-person teams deploying radios on a backpack, but we just can't do that in Europe. So in 15 seconds, what could work? I do believe that we could get to about 30% spectrum efficiency improvement, and even without additional spectrum, that would be really attractive. And if that, and Matthew talked about this earlier, if we could have efficient spectrum sharing between both systems without too much compromise, then that would prevent the loss of efficiency by partitioning the spectrum. And that would be enough of a business case on its own. And I did mention device tenure, and it came up earlier, but what will hurt the business case is take millions of users getting into the new system. That used to happen relatively quickly, but now devices are held on to people today for 4 years, and it will be longer over time. We've seen it in every, desktop, laptop, they're now 10 years, the same thing's gonna come, so we will go slower on that. Sorry, I'll stop there.
Perfect. Mark, thanks very much. And interesting to see that maybe when we come to 7G, a Volvo or in a smartphone may have the same lifetime. Robert, you're next.
Right. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here. I'm a bit of an odd character in the sense that I'm a regulator, an economic regulator at that. I'm not one of the people that really has an opinion about what 6G should be in terms of technology. I just take whatever comes at face value and try to regulate the market. But I came here because what we saw in what happened in 5G, not just in 5G, but even in 4G and 3G. And I was hoping that some of the lessons, and we've talked a lot about that, some of the lessons of previous generations have been learned, and whether some of the whether we would make some changes with the latest generation. What I'm really concerned about is that consumers get a good service at a fair price, and that the industry invests and innovates and gets enough of a return on that. And I think what has happened with most generational changes is interesting to observe if you step back. And from my point of view, first of all, there is a huge gap between always what the technology actually does and what it was promoted to deliver. We always overpromised and underdelivered on these things. 4G was better in that than 5G, but still, we may, as my neighbor here says, we may have a good business case still for 5G because it delivers data more cheaply, and etc. But that was not how 5G was sold. I can remember defenders coming to us, and what they do is they first invent the technology, then they get some economic consultants to come along to say how much value there is in this technology, and that's why nations have to invest in it. And there is $1.5 trillion attached to it. They get the European Commission in Europe to be so stupid to say by 2030 everyone should have it. To me, as an economist and as an economic regulator, that is just painful to watch. I would rather see people invest if there is a business case, and it's defenders who have to actually prove that they have something to sell that makes that business case, rather than to rely on politicians to do that for them. So I've been very, very disappointed over the years about how 3G, how to some extent 4G, but also with 5G has been promoted. So I think if you look at the future, the first thing we should do is be realistic about what it can deliver. And when I hear the discussion here today about 6G, I don't necessarily hear a revolutionary new product, and that is fine. What I hear is very good new features, such as energy efficiency, security. We need all those things, but don't sell it as if we ever get that far, don't sell it as the next best thing as sliced bread. So that would be my observation. If we then think about what else can we do? First of all, deliver what you promise. Secondly, make it a viable investment for operators. I think operators in particular here in Europe, because and I can't comment on the rest of the world, but there has been quite a bit of strong competition in the market. Margins are not what they once were. These operators don't have the kind of bags of gold lying under their desk as they used to. So it is not going to be easy for them to part with their cash. So there has to be a very good business case. And I've heard operators say to me, if 6G is anything like 5G, I won't touch it with a barge pole. So we have to overcome that kind of reticence, because even though it might have been a positive business case in the end, we need to do more than that. I was thinking myself, what would I do? And my comments about what you could do as an industry, and I'm not technical in the sense like all the people that do standardization, but I do hear a lot of people complain about there is not enough innovation. We pay too much for spectrum. We have auctions that are too expensive. Well, then why doesn't industry come up with a solution where all operators can live happily in the same spectrum bands altogether? We do that in GPS. They all work together, and then we can do away with auctions. We can have smaller players, bigger players, all use the same spectrum, a bit like Wi-Fi. That would be my big idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Whether we're going to discuss exclusive licensing or not, we'll see. But interesting closing words. Ian, over to you.
Great, thank you. So I'm an industry analyst, and I'm like Mark. I've been in the industry many, many years, have many grey hairs as a result of that. I was at a wireless operator in the early days of 3G. I think that's where half my grey hairs came from. 20 years on from that, what's happening? You know, we've got ongoing rising data consumption. That means there isn't a choice of whether to invest or not. We have to invest. If we don't invest, that rising data consumption will mean the actual experience, the performance of the networks will just get worse. It's not a case of building the case, it's how strong a case can we build? How much investment can we do? Can we exceed that rising data consumption? Can we get ahead of it? Or do we just invest enough to maintain the current experience? When I look ahead to the 6G era, I see a couple of things. One is we do a terrible job as an industry explaining about the benefits of the new technologies. If we look at where we are in the 5G era, we've done a terrible job communicating 5G. You know, people have put 5G on phones where there's been no new spectrum, it's been non-standalone access, there've been no new benefits. Other people have used new spectrum, had big performance improvements, much greater data consumption. And then we've got now in that second phase of 5G, we see, you know, people communicating it very differently. Some people putting an icon on the phone when it's standalone, some not. In the US, people putting icons on if you're on mid-band and high-band spectrum, and there's a mess. What we need to do is we need to communicate the benefits of the technology and what the technology is much better. And we need to start with 5G Advanced. If we don't get 5G Advanced right and build the investment case for that, we're not going to be in the right place to build the investment case for 6G either. 5G Advanced is going to deliver, hopefully, many of those vertical industry benefits that have been the promise of 5G. They're going to move beyond fixed wireless access, enhanced mobile broadband, but we need to get that right. Otherwise, things like sensing and these other use cases that have been talked about today, we just won't be in the right place for that. And so we have to build that business case for 5G Advanced today, and we have to communicate that second wave of 5G in a consistent way across all operators, across all vendors, to make that case and persuade people that it's worthwhile investing in that 5G Advanced network equipment and in the device upgrade, the CPE upgrades, to connect to those improved 3GPP standard networks. We have to do that. When I hear about reticence, particularly in Europe, about investment, and I hear about software-only upgrades, how I would frame this is somewhat different. It's not about not investing, it's about having an elegant, simple network architecture that has benefits, that's focused, doesn't have 6 different options on how to deploy the network. There is a streamlined, clear way to deploy it that is elegant, that is straightforward, that removes unnecessary complexities, many of which may have been introduced in the 5G era, and lowers the cost of deployment. If we can do that with a standard, that makes the investment case much easier. So simplicity is important. The other piece I think that's striking is the sustainability argument, energy efficiency. That clearly has to be part of what we're doing today. Now, every G has had, every air interface has had a focus on improving that energy efficiency, lower energy per gigabyte. I think we obviously have to do that here too. The challenge is, how do we think about it? We have these goals to be carbon neutral, but should we think just about the telecom industry, the wireless space, or should we think more broadly across the whole economy? If the mobile networks, the telecom networks can deliver an overall more sustainable economy, maybe that's a different discussion than just focusing on the carbon output of the telecom networks themselves. AI is one of those interesting examples. It's clearly something that if you run AI workloads on the RAN, is being discussed, or other things like that, it can push up the energy consumption. But if by doing that, we make the whole economy more carbon efficient, maybe that's a good thing. So it's thinking about not just us, but thinking about all those different parts of the economy, which 6G will enable. But then you think back, how do we do that? Again, we have to get 5G Advanced right, because that's where many of these verticals will start engaging with them before that 6G era. So sustainability, simplicity, getting 5G Advanced right, and finding a better way of communicating the benefits of technology. And actually, if you're an operator, actually marketing the strengths of your network more, not the camera on the phone. Marketing that network strength is a good start.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Ian. In terms of communicating the benefits of 5G, there's a fantastic advert in the US by the service provider kind of owned by Ryan Reynolds, where he's kind of getting his CTO to try and explain what the benefits of 5G are, and after about 10 seconds, he cuts him off and says, well, we'll just give it to you for free. So that may be one way to communicate it, but we'll see if it can be done even better. Luigi, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm at Qualcomm. I look after spectrum and technology policy, and this is the investment issues moving towards 6G is also pretty much an interesting problem that at Qualcomm we are looking at. How much does it cost to deploy 6G? I don't know, to be honest. What I know is that at the moment there are a number of estimates how much it is going to cost to complete the deployment of 5G and to meet the digital decade targets. So the Commission told us 200 billion, probably more than 200 billion. So what are we doing at Qualcomm now? Basically, Qualcomm obviously is a leader in technology. We cannot, forget that there are technology advances. We are investing into R&D. We think 6G is going to happen. It's going to be basically around 2030. But then really this is a critical time for us to work in the industry with the key stakeholders, with the mobile operators, but also with the regulators to see how we can make it easy to have the combination of, regulatory framework, technologies, and also, approach to investment so that these guys, the mobile network operator, can be confident and can have the money to go to 6G and they can get actually, the profits. So when we look at where we are in Europe, obviously, we cannot stop, because if we stop, the other regions of the world, they will not do the same. So it is not a question of we invest or we don't invest. We have to invest. How to make it easy to invest, that is really the question. Otherwise, we will just lose, basically, we will just be left behind in the world. Now, this is, the problems are out there. I mean, there is across Europe problems in terms of fragmentation, the scale of the operators. So, I mean, what Mark was saying, it is correct. I mean, and so how regulators can probably enable operators to have some in-market consolidation. That's something that regulators will have to consider seriously in the next few years. How do we make sure that the spectrum is not as expensive as it has been in 5G era? How do we avoid to get this artificial scarcity? All these issues have to be dealt with. So very important this. Now, having said that, what can operators also do? Because it is not just about regulators. So can operators also start embracing additional things like network sharing more or spectrum sharing more? Because the key question is, in 6G, can we still have 4 networks deployed by network operators per country? Can we still have this battle? I don't want to share basically spectrum, or I want to share under certain conditions. So this is something that really the operators have to start considering if 6G must be affordable for them. And looking also, at the issues of CapEx and OpEx, so in the industry, we also need to look at how to make, the CapEx, OpEx for the new network going down. And this has to be really a collaborative effort, because obviously there will be different forces in the industry. Some of them will want to go and maximize their profit, right? But this will not be for the overall good of the industry. So that's really my remarks for today.
Perfect. Luigi, thank you very much. And thanks to all of you for giving us very interesting insights and I think a lot to discuss. Having heard what you all have just said, some people may just think, ooh, it's a bit of a kind of cautious note to end the day. Where's the optimism? But at the same time, a realistic view on what's ahead of you, I think is often quite important. Now, one example I like to use is that I've done a lot of work on spectrum in the past. And about 15 years ago, I had to convince every single of my clients not to spend 25 billion on every single 5 megahertz, because this wasn't the one and only solution to killing a business. These days, I have to convince operators to at least consider spending 5 million, because there may still be value in these assets in the long term. So we seem to have this kind of fluctuation between extreme optimism and maybe too much caution, where I think some of the realistic words that you've mentioned today may be misunderstood as being pessimistic. So picking up on some of these points, maybe let's start about the first question of kind of where does the funding come from? I know we don't know how much the 6G networks are going to cost at this stage, but if we try to look ahead, what are your views on how you could possibly justify a 6G environment, and what may help? So maybe you can comment on market, if you have your market structures, or what could be the drivers. Maybe Mark, if I can.
Yeah, I'll try. There are reasons to be positive, and I think satellite integration is definitely one of those. I think 100% coverage is transformative, and we will not build any more incremental geographic coverage after the SRM program, because we really are at the ends of the country. We're building sites with helicopters and going into areas that are, from a sustainability point of view, it's difficult. We don't want to be driving trucks into these areas. So that is a challenge, and satellite will be transformative for that and for resilience as well, as we've discussed. And there'll always be optimization and infill, but so I'm very optimistic about that. And as I said, on spectrum efficiency, where funding will come from, and I would say our business is sort of tired of talking about use cases. We'd much rather talk about services that we're selling to customers. And the way to do that is to solve problems for your customers. And I think we need to go back to explaining what problems this technology will solve for all of the stakeholders that will participate in the ecosystem and in these networks, and yeah, demonstrably prove value, and then the funding will flow.
I think the word value is important here, because often people may misunderstand value for revenue, but value may also be cost savings or other areas. I think that's quite important to differentiate. Robert, I don't know if you have any comments. Maybe also, if I may just interject one more aspect of this, and we can pick this up later on as well, is that this notion of falling behind drives a lot of discussion at the policy and also the regulatory level. Is that a real concern to you as a regulator, or do you have other concerns when it comes to 6G?
Sure, you'd never want to really fall behind, but I think it is so exaggerated, some of those stories, that I don't think that it is. Look at COVID. Just as an aside, the networks held up very well, at least in Ireland they did. Everyone moved from working in the office to working at home, and the telecom industry reacted to that, and that wasn't a problem. Not that everyone had fiber at home or had 5G at home. You need adequate networks. For a lot of use cases, adequate networks are sufficient. And that's what we had. And I think that that's a little bit why we are in the situation we are. Customers were really looking for data on their mobile that 4G could deliver, the kind of speeds, etc. That was the use case at the time. That was why people invested, why operators could invest and could actually get more money out of it. With 5G, and now also with some of the features that I see on 6G, it's great that we can save costs, that we can do it in a more secure manner. But I think what what industry also needs is increased revenues, is if possible, is at least a vision of new things that could happen that could drive up the revenue stream. And that is difficult because at the same time, we cannot go to a market where there is only a single operator present. And, you know, you want to have a certain amount of competition in that market. You cannot, we can do a lot as regulators to streamline auctions a bit more, to make it simpler to get licenses or to get, you know, real estate to have your masts on. But in the end, you still need to have an optimistic story and an optimistic revenue outlook, a view in order to get the funds.
So I think there's a few things here. I think one of the challenges the industry has, and we all have, is that data usage is rising. If we want to sell into a new industry vertical, we need the capacity on the network to support that new business case, that new revenue line, while maintaining service for the existing users of the network. And what we've seen with 5G is, even with that NSA service, we've seen operators, particularly in the US and in other parts of the world, launch fixed wireless access services because they've got a chunk of new capacity that they could afford to use for that service without damaging the smartphone user experience. When we think about all those industry verticals, we think about private networks and extending a dedicated private network to a hybrid model, maybe on a network slice. You need that capacity on that network to support that service while maintaining your fixed wireless access, your smartphone, your EMBB type services as well. How do we do that? Well, if we look at what happened with 2G to 3G, 3G to 4G, they were more spectrally efficient. We could put more data, more users in the same, broadly in the same megahertz. 4G to 5G, not so big a jump in efficiency, quite small. We're approaching Shannon's limit. So what we need to do is to tap into new spectrum bands. And that's what happened at WRC last autumn, where, you know, a whole range of new bands were identified, but we'll probably need 6G to be able to tap into those. And that gives you the new capacity that you can use to build new revenue lines that you can use to justify the investment. And we need that new capacity. We need that new wireless capacity, for example, from those 7 to 15 gigahertz type bands, maybe 6 gigahertz, but we need that new capacity coming through, not just to meet the rising data usage, but to be able to add in these new revenue lines where each of these new verticals will add data consumption onto the network.
Well, yes, for sure. I mean, new spectrum bands obviously will be needed. You know, obviously, once you have new spectrum bands, you also have to build the infrastructure, you know, that are servicing those bands. I wanted to actually go back to Robert's point about, you know, competition. You know, I mean, we see that probably at the moment we are in Europe doing a little bit too much for consumers, probably in the sense that. And we are making the MNOs in a situation where, yes, they're offering, you know, services at very kind of low price or lower price than other regions, you know. But this way, basically, it is probably not economically sustainable for them long term, you know, to continue offering or investing in new technologies, you know, in 6G, etc. So we need to strike the right balance between, you know, what the consumers pay and also for the operators to be able to continue, you know, to get basically the reward on the efforts. So in Europe, we are in a situation where, I mean, there are over 50 probably, right, mobile network operators, whereas in the US, there are only 3 or 4. So how, I mean, the question is really how these guys can generate scale, you know. If in a market like a small market like France or Italy, compared to the US, they are 3 or 4 competitors. And so how can they basically, you know, go and take, it is not probably the problem in getting the supply of base stations because they, especially those mobile network operators that are multinational players, they can aggregate volumes. But on a number of other things that they do, if they don't have scale, then they cannot basically, you know, have the nice margins and they cannot reinvest. So you say, you know, where the money come from, that is a possibility where this has to come from, providing services to them, you know, different, you know, verticals, but then they should probably be allowed provide, different quality of services depending on what they, the vertical they serve. Again, this is another regulatory issue. Otherwise, they have to go back, to the investors' equity or debt, But I guess, for getting equities, you need to be attractive as an industry. People put in some money because they want to get more money, and people who are actually lending you money, for your debt, they probably want to see something stable in terms of infrastructure for a number of years. So maybe the wholesale model is something that they could look at. Insurance company, for example, right? So, but again, it's not an easy situation.
Just a short word about consolidation. We hear this a lot, this comparison with the United States and Europe, and we have so many operators here. The fact is that Europe is not the same as the United States. It is, from a consumer point of view, not the same market. And we've had several operators over the last few years, and I worked for one. I worked for Vodafone in the past. Try to piece together a pan-European network. They got a lot of cost savings out of it because they procured almost everything they could at a central level. That was not enough. Deutsche Telekom, the same. They're now voting with their feet and kind of disintegrating their networks. So I hear you about consolidation being needed. I just don't see the industry doing it in that vertical way that Luigi is talking about. I think there will be a lot of consolidation in Europe, but it will be more on a horizontal layer basis.
Yeah, I think on the consolidation point, there's an interesting question of whether cross-country consolidation is the way forward or in-country consolidation, which probably is a debate in itself. I personally see more benefits on in-country consolidation than across markets, but there may be an endgame here. We have one question from the virtual audience, and thank you very much. And of course, in the floor, I'll open questions to the floor in a few minutes. The question is whether 6G can accelerate the reduction of the digital divide with appropriate business models. Don't know if you have any questions or thoughts on that.
It will definitely have a role to play when talking about ubiquitous coverage to close that divide. And I think we have reasonable confidence that we should think about satellite providing a reasonably good service in the future, more comparable with terrestrial mobile service. And so we will close outdoor geographic coverage, that gap, which is one of the biggest ones we spend a lot of time talking about. Then, the digital divide also includes digital inclusion. And we at BT spend quite a bit of time thinking about that, and we have a number of products to try and help and meet what we see as our obligations as a business there. I think there is always more to do, and sometimes the regulatory environment doesn't help with that when we have to treat everything equally. But in order to close the digital divide, you might have to do things differently, and we saw that during the pandemic. But it will definitely have a role to play.
I think it depends what you mean by digital divide. If you mean global digital divide, then, or even if you mean within a country and looking at rural, I think typically what you need is a cost-effective way of serving those unserved groups. It's not just about the coverage, it's having a cost-effective way of doing it. And often that's not using the latest technology, it's using something that's maybe a little bit older, a little bit more proven, it's cheaper, it's more cost-effective. There's an interesting dynamic happening, again, currently in the industry, where you can see some of the fixed wireless stuff looking to use RedCap type devices to migrate people from 4G to 5G so you can tap into the 5G spectrum bands. But the whole point about a RedCap device is it's cost constrained. It doesn't give you a full fat 5G experience, but it still enables you to tap into those 5G bands. And there's a push there to use RedCap for fixed wireless access. I think I'm seeing particular interest in Southeast Asia on that. And that helps you with the digital divide because you can push those fixed wireless access services out where there isn't wired infrastructure, but in a cost-effective way. But it's not using the latest and fastest technology. It's using something that's been designed to be cost-effective and value for money. And so I'm not sure how quickly 6G will help us with digital divide. It might be some of these older technologies are the key ones we need to use.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any questions on the audience? In the front here, we have a question. And if you could state your name and affiliation, that'd be great.
I'm Zahid Ghadiali from 3G, 4G. So I just wanted to give you a comment first with regards to your Mint Mobile, Ryan Reynolds MVNO, where he was giving away 5G for free. But by giving away 5G for free, he was able to sell his network for $1.5 billion to T-Mobile or something like that. So I think that was a good bargain, right? So I want to come back to a point which Ian raised in the beginning about simplicity of the network. And this is one of the problems in our industry, right, which we don't really look at. So when we moved from 3G to 4G, we simplified by the network by moving all IP network. So we got rid of all the CS domain, but we screwed it up. We forgot to put voice on it. So we had to come up with so many different hacks, right? CS fallbacks, SVLT, all these different acronyms. And then we came up with VoLTE, which was the solution which we are still using for 5G. The problem is it was such a complex solution, it still hasn't been solved. So there are still some problems with emergency calling. And the thing is, 3GPP could have said like, oh, we'll wait a couple of years and we'll sort out the problem. But 3GPP is like a Titanic, you know, it's even though it knows it's going to crash, it's like, well, we are just going to keep going, you know, and this is the big problem. So when we talk about simplification, right, like one of the slides was about how many different network options were there initially for 5G core network. And then we realized we don't want all those options. We are just going to stick with simple standalone, non-standalone. And there is no real easy answer. So I don't know, does anybody has a comment, like if suppose we realize 6G is not doing its job properly, can we just wait 2 years, 3 years till we fix it rather than like, oh, well, we are a Titanic, we have to just keep going?
I think I'd like to see the industry less as the Titanic and about to sink and more like a super tanker that has momentum and keeps going and is powering the world.
Yes, I mean, I don't know if we can wait, but I think some of the points you raise are probably correct in the sense that if we reflect on the move from 4G to 5G, what we have done is we have accelerated, for example, the NSA deployment of 5G, and that gained us basically 6 months on the launch of 5G. But then at the end of the day, if we look at it today, really the 5G SA is now, you know, like probably delayed much more than, you know, the 6 months delay, I mean, anticipation we had of the 5G launch. And obviously this is costing to the mobile network operators a lot of money. And not only that, but basically not having the full 5G from day one, not all the streams of revenues that would have basically been exploited are there, were there from the beginning. And then maybe also people or consumers are a little bit upset because they say, okay, what is this 5G? It is not delivering on the promises, and probably the approach was not, we could have been a little bit more patient, you know, in doing that. So there is some
I completely agree. NSA was a mistake. For 6 months, pull forward, you know, we haven't launched SA in the UK. 2 operators have, but for 6 months pull forward, we're 5 years late. That's a bad bargain, and we should not do that again. And if it's driven by, you know, I mean, we don't want fragmentation, but we shouldn't compromise on bad ideas. NSA has been very successful nonetheless, but yeah, I completely agree with you.
But I think there's a lesson from NSA. I mean, NSA has basically added complexity. I mean, very few operators globally have actually switched off their NSA network. A few have, but what happens then is some of their 5G devices then stop working because they don't have good enough SA support to work. So you go to Singapore, you look at one of the operators, and they list their supported devices, and it excludes the iPhone 12, which was the first 5G iPhone. It's not compatible. Push back onto 4G. But I think what the lesson is for the 6G world is when we hear operators say, well, we don't want to do too much new because it's going to cost us too much to deploy. The risk is we do another NSA. We do another little tweak on 5G, and it then causes complexity later.
Yeah, but the point that you just mentioned, that's a different problem. And about faulty roaming, for example, that there were too many options. Faulty was not locked down well enough. And then you roam to a country where 2G or 3G is no longer supported and you can't make a phone call. That was a big step back in customer experience as well. So in that sense, we have to learn from that and not let that repeat itself.
I agree, and there are solutions coming for that problem, which is what we always do, create a problem and then try and find a way to solve it. But on simplification in general, that's got a really good business case, by the way. We just turned off our 3G network, but we still have circuit switch fallback in 2G, which will be much harder to turn off. But I just wanted to talk a little bit on simplification and bring it back to sustainability for another reason to be positive, and broaden it out, because the most important thing we can do in networks for sustainability is connect buildings with passive optical fiber and put low power radio in the building. That is almost an order of magnitude lower energy cost in sending packets, depending on your benchmark, than carrying it over a mobile network. So luckily we're fibering the whole country, so we'll get there. And 6G will need to do its part on sustainability, but overall networks will get to a much lower energy footprint on their own, with a great business case for that.
I would quickly comment that it takes a lot of restraint from the operator side to not jump onto the quick and easy solution to get 5G out. Like NSA was a great way to just get 5G, and if you can get it before your competitors, there's a lot of dynamics there, which actually also come back to the spectrum auctions.
Why is it a race? The race to 5G.
Well, you've probably been a lot of board meetings where there've been factions arguing.
Gavin Patterson sat at a conference like this and said, we will be first to 5G services, and then we all wrote it down.
Exactly. So there's a lot of discipline to a certain extent that is required that isn't always there. Anyway, any other questions from the audience? I have one in the front here, and then we have William as well.
Hi, Frankie Spagnolo. I run the International MVNOX Association. And just speaking to that model and to the fact that we're talking about funding and where the carriers are spending money and the lack of the stash of gold underneath the desk anymore, how does a model like a virtual network operator, which was already running on T-Mobile's network, right, makes sense for them then to purchase back? I mean, the economics of this process, rather than, especially with the move to 6G, becoming more adept at enabling this sort of virtualization and those entities beginning to run and operate seamless of the operator, this put it out there, buy it back kind of movie star model of virtualization. How does that really play into the economics long term of this problem that we're talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and the technology will bring different models to the wholesale space. But the fundamental here is of running a network is networks are high fixed cost business, so scale drives value. MVNOs bring scale. So you're an attractive proposition when the economics are right. In our market, the wholesale economics are really challenging. And then from the technology point of view, the partitioning, slicing will give you different models where wholesalers can have differentiated service, could even pay for a better service than the host network or not. And I think that's going to open up more opportunities, but I probably don't think that they'll be taken advantage of in the sort of retail space, but they might be in the enterprise space where it's more interesting. But yeah, it's about scale. And I've never seen any gold under a desk anyway. Just
No, still waiting for that as well, unfortunately. Looking at time, I think it's time to wrap up. Thank you very much, all of you, for your contributions, for your realistic views, for giving us some ideas on how to think about 6G ahead of time, not rush into unnecessarily quick decisions. And let's see where we are in 10 years' time and whether we've stuck to that. So thank you very much to all of you. And thanks to all of you for your questions as well. Okay, that was the final panel for today, but we have a fantastic way to end the day. I'm excited to announce Julia Lopez, who's the Minister of State for the Department of Science, Innovation, Technology, to give the closing keynote. Julia, floor's all yours, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much to Forum Global and Ofcom for inviting me to speak and for hosting us all here today. Now, I understand that I am between you and drinks, which has made me feel very self-conscious. And I suspect you're all at the end of the day conference feeling when you're ready to just let loose. But for those international partners who have travelled here in person, I really hope you've enjoyed your time in London. It's an absolutely filthy day for you here. So I hope you arrived yesterday and had a bit of time to yourselves. And if you're joining us online, I hope it's been a stimulating and productive day for you so far as well. I particularly wanted to be at this conference today because as the Minister responsible for telecoms in the UK government, I am really genuinely passionate about the importance of digital infrastructure and the benefits it brings for communities across every part of our country. But also, of course, it has massive implications for our national security and resilience. I think all of those aspects have been underlined because of the way in which the pandemic played out. Now, digital infrastructure, as you all know, is absolutely critical to how people across the UK and the wider world live and work. And that's why we've set ambitious and very stretching targets for digital connectivity in the UK. And we are determined that we should reach every corner of the country. We have our £5 billion Project Gigabit. That's an ambitious program to get gigabit broadband to at least 85% of premises by 2025 and over 99% by 2030. And I've had a great update from the team about that so far. So in 2019, we were about 6% digital gigabit capable coverage. We're now at 82% today, and progress is going really well. Now, in mobile, we've set an ambition to deliver standalone 5G to all populated areas by 2030. In parallel, we continue to work hard with our mobile network operators to get 4G coverage to even our most remote rural communities. Now, we're working to get the best available connections to people now, but also we need to be supporting the technology that will form a big part of our networks tomorrow. And it's fantastic to see you all here today actively participating in shaping that future when it comes to communications. In the UK, we're committed to playing a leading role in the development of 6G and future telecoms, working closely with our international partners. We're very excited by the transformative potential of the next generation of communications technologies, with the scope to embed and enable other disruptive technologies such as AI and to supercharge the economy through automation and virtualization. 6G offers the huge prize of ubiquitous connectivity, and we mustn't miss that opportunity. In the face of very fierce geopolitical competition, we also cannot afford to fall behind. So as we look ahead to the future of 6G, we shouldn't forget that there is still a lot more to do on 5G. And that's why we published the Wireless Infrastructure Strategy in April last year. And that provides a framework for driving the deployment and the adoption of advanced wireless connectivity across our country. That includes boosting the role for the government that the government can play in building the demand for 5G adoption through the £40 million 5G Innovation Regions Fund. And I understand that that has been a subject of discussion today, just how you make the business case for investment in those networks. So from Belfast to Glasgow, Manchester to Sussex, cities and councils are deploying 5G to help them decarbonise their transport systems, improve their agricultural yields, and to digitise their port operations. As we roll out 5G across the UK, it becomes even more important that we consider the security and the resilience of our networks from the very start. And I speak as the minister who took through the Telecoms Security Act through Parliament. And my department is now working with operators to remove high-risk vendors from our networks. That's been a slow and difficult and very costly process, so I'd rather not go through that experience again. Now, the government has also taken steps to diversify the telecom supply chain and is supporting the development of open and interoperable technologies, such as Open RAN, through £250 million of investment. Now, again, it's important that we continue to invest in improving the security and resilience of our networks now, and we will. But the development of 6G is an opportunity to put security and resilience proactively at the heart of communications networks of the future. Now, although we are far from finished with 5G, we do believe it's important to start shaping 6G now in line with our priorities and our values. The UK has set out what we want to see from 6G, and that includes digital access and inclusion, so that we make the most of the satellite technologies and the terrestrial networks to deliver ubiquitous coverage, that we have open, secure and resilient networks so that we can have confidence in the technologies that will be increasingly embedded across every part of our economy and our society, and sustainability so that we develop the next generation of technologies in a way that uses far less energy. Now, I'm pleased that the IMT 2030 framework agreed at the ITU reflects those priorities, and I hope that as this framework's developed into technical standards, these overarching priorities remain at the heart of 6G. With 6G and the broader development of future communications technologies set to be so very crucial to our prosperity and security, our government also took the decision last year to name future telecoms as one of 5 critical technologies for the UK. That's alongside AI, quantum, semiconductors, and engineering biology. We believe there are very valuable and great opportunities for UK researchers and innovators to provide some of the solutions that could become part of 6G standards and eventually products, and the government will support them to do that. We've started by putting higher levels of public R&D funding towards that. In October, we announced £70 million worth of funding, which we provided through UK Research and Innovation into a Future Telecoms Technology Missions Fund. That's already established 3 future communications research hubs, which will seek to advance the critical early stages of 6G technology development. The hubs already have a network of over 200 academic and industry partners, and that continues to expand. Alongside this, my department has established the UK Telecoms Innovation Network, that's UK TIN, and that seeks to convene the UK sector, bringing government, industry and academia together to catalyse that R&D investment, cooperation and commercialisation. We've also crucially been working to support spectrum innovation as a critical requirement both for wireless technologies now and for the development of 6G. Last year, we as a government published our spectrum statement, and that set out a new strategic vision and principles for spectrum policy. And we've recently launched a sandbox initiative to explore opportunities for enhanced sharing of spectrum. And that includes exploring spectrum sharing between mobile, Wi-Fi and private networks. Now, I want to show how great a place the UK is to develop future technologies and to also show our ambition. And that's why when it comes to London Tech Week, I'm going to be setting out a 10-year vision for future communications technologies. This will say a little bit more about how we want to build on UK strengths in research, increase commercialisation, and also work very closely with industry and international counterparts to shape the development of the technologies that will go into the next generation of networks. And we know that 6G will be consensus-driven and industry-led. Our approach will be reflecting that, and we're very excited about what's ahead, but we can't deliver this alone. Cooperation, including through events like this one, will be absolutely crucial. And with this in mind, my Department for Science, Innovation and Technology has been working to strengthen our international links on telecoms. Last year, we established the Global Coalition on Telecoms, it's called GCOT, another acronym for your notes, alongside Australia, Canada, Japan and the US. Now, the UK is chairing the coalition steering group this year and leading a work stream on future telecoms. Alongside this, we were delighted to have confirmed our reassociation to Horizon Europe. We've also been very pleased to strengthen our bilateral relationships on telecoms with a wide range of partners. Examples include a joint research and development project underway with the Republic of Korea and a future telecoms research program in place in collaboration with India's Department of Science and Technology. Research and innovation, as you all know, doesn't recognize borders, and we have to think globally in our approach to 6G. Events like this and the conversations that they enable are a very important step to ensuring a coherent approach to the development of 6G that avoids that risk that we all understand of fragmentation. Bringing together the perspectives of regulators, industry, academic institutions, policymakers, and standards bodies regularly over the coming years is going to be helping us build that next generation of networks in a way that delivers the outcomes we want for consumers, businesses, and governments. Now, speaking on behalf of the UK government, I want to underline our desire to work with you as we do so to shape 6G that's secure, resilient, open, and interoperable, and which delivers the benefits of ubiquitous, intelligent, reliable connectivity for all our countries and all the people that we represent. So thank you again for coming today, and do enjoy the rest of the conference and look out for our future strategy to be announced in the mid-June.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much, Minister, for coming and helping us close the first day of this conference. And I mentioned at the start of the day how in many ways UK is leading the way when it comes to some of the work that's been done into the early research into 6G. And it was fantastic to have you here and to tell us directly about some of that work. So thank you so much again. Really do appreciate that. And as I said, what a way to finish our first day. So we've had some really interesting discussions today and lots of debates. And a big thank you to all of our speakers, all of our panelists. A big thank you to everyone here in the room for all the questions and comments, and of course to everyone watching online as well. So we've had lots of comments, lots of questions from our online audience as well, and really do appreciate everyone who's been following the event. I think I'm right in saying we've had almost 300 people in total online watching the event at some point today, so that's fantastic. So yes, that wraps things up for today. A reminder that all of the recordings for the sessions today are available to download. There'll be links being sent out to all of you to enable you to access those. And you can also check those out on the Forum Europe or Forum Global YouTube site. But for now, I'd like to invite everybody here in the room to join us outside for cocktails and opportunity to wish everyone watching back at home a very pleasant evening. We're back again here tomorrow at 9:30. And we're going to be continuing the discussions, I think we're starting off looking at WRC and discussions again throughout the day tomorrow. So looking forward to seeing everyone back here at 9:30 tomorrow morning. But in the meantime, enjoy the cocktails. Have a good evening, everyone. And as I said, see you back here tomorrow. Thank you very much.